As we look into the start house, it's the American Chris Horner. His best ever finish in the Tour de France was 15th last year. Here he is now, sitting in 10th place overall, Paul. And he's not a bad time trialist. He shouldn't have any problem holding it. Can he improve on it?
Well, that's the big question, you know. He's looking for about 1 minute and 19 seconds on Roman Kreuziger, the rider who starts in front of him. And he may well, he's looking for 25 seconds, sorry, and he's looking for a little bit more on rider Heyerdahl, so he could do the performance. The way he rode over the Col du Tourmalet indicates to me that this man at 38 years of age is actually finishing the Tour de France in an extremely fresh state.
38 years of age, out on course, number 21, Lance Armstrong. His check at the time at the first check, good enough for the 31st best time. Not what he's used to in his life in the Tour de France. He has won 11 time trials of varying distances, most of them eventually building the foundations of his 7 victories in the Tour de France. The last one coming at Saint-Étienne in 2005. Now Lance Armstrong is riding out his career in the Tour de France. Although he's come back twice, guaranteed he won't be back again. This is it.
Well, it will be a lap of honor on the Champs-Élysées for him tomorrow. 8 laps of around 5.5 kilometers at a good 55 kilometers an hour. But I think on this occasion, he will savor that. There's no pressure on his shoulders in this final Tour de France now. This is a question of pride for him, though, Phil, to get himself up to Paris. And I will ask myself the question, I'm sure many other people will ask themselves the questions for years to come. What would have happened if he hadn't had that mechanical incident on the road to the forest of Arenberg? What would have happened if he hadn't crashed out 3 times on the big Alpine stage? We'll never know the answer.
I think it'd have been a challenger.
Luis Leon Sanchez, Thomas Lovquist of Team Sky has just gone through with a fairly lowly place. In fact, 46th place for him when he went through the first time check. And he's lost himself a good 2 minutes, and in fact a flat 2 minutes to the time of Tony Martin at that point. We're now waiting for the arrival at the next checkpoint at 36 kilometers of Bradley Wiggins of the United Kingdom and Team Sky. He went through the first time check of the day in 3rd place and was 31 seconds adrift. Armstrong here, just looking at the pedaling style, is using a much bigger gear than he normally uses, rolling his body a fraction, not quite as fluid as he used to be in his younger days when he was the dominator of the individual time trial at speeds of 48, 49 and 50 kilometers an hour. So just a quick chance here to look at the bike of one of the other riders from Livestrong. This is Levi Leipheimer, a slightly smaller rider than Armstrong and his teammate Andreas Kloden. But because of his size, you can see here Levi Leipheimer is able to get down into a very aerodynamic position. When you see him putting his head down there into the middle of his hands, the reason for that is just to try and make the front end of his body just like the front end of an arrow. This is Roman Kreuziger, a youngster from Team Liquigas. And I have to say that I'd expected a bit more from him as well, but this has been a very difficult tour. He's a rider from the Czech Republic. He's just turned 25 years of age. He rolls down the ramp and he starts the tour, the Tour time trial in 9th place overall, looking to see if he can improve himself too.
Looking at the one-legged man here, this is Andy Schleck. He's just warmed up the right leg. He's probably going to warm up the left leg now. He's working very hard behind the scenes at the start in Bordeaux, while Lance Armstrong is racing up towards the finish in Pauillac. And we're looking for the time now of Armstrong at the next check. Evans has gone through. He's slipping right out of it completely. He's not racing the time trial, Cadel Evans. He's now gone through 129th. Which is almost at the back of the field.
No, that certainly is. I'm not surprised, really. It's been a long, hard ride. It's important now also for many of the other riders out on course to do something. Chris Horner, I'd like to see Chris Horner finish in the top 10. He's been robbed of the last 2 years his participation in the Tour de France due to very nasty accidents. But every time he's fought his way back.
Back in the start house, this is Joaquin Rodriguez from the Katusha team. He got his stage victory in Monde. When we raced up to the airfield, he had a good finish too in the Pyrenees at the Col du Tourmalet. And he's looking as though he's very contented now with his very first Tour de France. And well, he might be, Rodriguez, because he sits there in 7th position in the Tour de France. He's underway.
Well, he has a very big battle too, Phil, because for 22 seconds he could actually overtake Robert Gesink. And now rather interesting, because neither of these riders are really great reputed individual time trialists, and that I think will be one of the close battles of the top 10 here this afternoon.
Looking at the back of Chris Horn, I think, no, it's still Armstrong this, as he continues to race. Mario Ertz has gone through, Sandy Cassar has gone through as well in the second check at 36 kilometres, so Armstrong's not too far away there.
No, well, we'll get an idea to see just how he's riding this afternoon, but I suppose we are really more concerned with the big battle of the last two riders to start, Alberto Contador and Andy Schleck. And I'm amazed at the confidence that Schleck has had, Phil, over these last 10 days of the race, and he's never given up. He's never laid down arms. But there's another big battle as well between Sami Sanchez and Denis Menchov, the Basque rider, or the rider on the Basque team of Euskadi, up against Denis Menchov of Rabobank, and they too are only separated by 21 seconds.
That's going to be a battle.
Armstrong getting down. He has recorded in history the third fastest individual time trial in the Tour de France. That was back in the year 2000, when he recorded a speed of 53.986 kilometers an hour. The fastest time trial in the Tour de France, actually at more than 20 kilometers, was in fact Greg LeMond, and that was in 1989. The race in between Versailles and Paris, and Le Mans rode that time trial at 54.5 kilometers an hour, and that was the first time that we'd ever really seen it. That was the first year that we'd ever really seen the riders using the triathlon bars like the ones in the middle of Armstrong's bike here. That Unity bicycle he's riding there, made by the company Trek from the United States, is carrying messages for people who've been afflicted with cancer. And Armstrong has had a different name and a different message on that bike every day as he's ridden around France here. He's still looking at keeping himself inside of the top 40. It's not a great time. The time at this point, by the way, of Fabian Cancellara was 43 minutes and 1 second. Armstrong is still looking for that point to get to. I think he'd be quite happy once he gets up to the Champs-Élysées. Wife and family are waiting for him there. I suppose a very good celebration overnight. And then he'll be on the private jet, I presume, back to Texas. But he's still battling to get up there. Not as fluid. He's using a very big gear. This is not the low gear that Armstrong used to use when he was at the top of his form. 47th place there, looking at 4 minutes and 31 seconds lost. But when you're in 23rd place overall in the Tour de France, you don't quite have the same sort of motivation as when you're riding for the overall win. So that's Armstrong. The face very similar to the face that we've always known. And just looking through that record, by the way, the other time trial that he did, which was way up there, was a time trial at Futuroscope in 1999, when he went on to win his first Tour de France. That was a 57-kilometer individual time trial. He ran that off at 50 kilometers an hour. 6th overall, Robert Gesink of Team Rabobank in Holland. He's now out on course. He's trying to defend his 6th place, but breathing down his neck, as I mentioned, was the Spanish rider Joaquim Rodriguez. Now that will be a big battle. Now we're starting to get down to the last 5 men to start. Jürgen van den Broek of Belgium will be next, followed by Denis Menchov of Russia, Sami Sanchez of Spain, Andy Schleck of Luxembourg, and the last man to start right at the very end of the afternoon, and that will be at 2 minutes past 4 o'clock local time here in France, and that will be Alberto Contador, looking to increase his 8-second advantage.
In the start house, Denis Menchov riding today for a podium finish in the Tour de France. I think he probably is the better time trialist, but how do we know that? Next to go behind him by 3 minutes will be Samuel Sanchez.
Well, it's a big ride for him, Phil. Sammy Sanchez has got a 21-second advantage over Denis Menchov, and that basically corresponds to a half a second per kilometre. Now, if Denis Menchov can do that, he'll climb himself up into a podium position at the end of the day. Bear in mind, though, that historically, Sammy Sanchez has actually beaten Denis Menchov in an individual time trial. It was in the Vuelta a España, but it was only over 20 kilometres. And Denis Menchov on that occasion went through to win the Vuelta a España overall.
Well, Bradley Wiggins has fallen away from his great start early on. He started very quickly. He's now fallen down to 8th at the second check, which is rather sad. And riding currently at 2 kilometres per hour slower than the best time at the finish, which is the World Time Trial champion, Fabian Cancellara. As into the start house now will be Samuel Sanchez, waiting to make his start. This is the beautiful city of Bordeaux. Right on the quays, on the top of the picture, is where, in fact, Mark Cavendish sprinted to that great victory yesterday, his 14th in history in the Tour de France. At the finish, it is Cancellara, Martin and Grabs, 3 of the world's finest time trialists.
Well, I have to say, Phil, a lot of people made the note about this. I remember a number of years ago one would not have recommended Bordeaux as a venue to come and visit. But since the last time we came to visit Bordeaux, and it was a start town back in 2006, I think they've taken a massive big scrubbing brush out to this place, because it really does look quite magnificent. They've cleaned up a lot of the buildings in the area, and I would say I would recommend anybody now to come and have a stay along the side of the Garonne.
Yes, it is very, very nice indeed. Nobody's reached the check since Bradley Wiggins, as we're watching Rominger here, Kreuziger rather. Wiggins has gone slipping further away now. He's 8th place, holding 8th at the third check at 45.4 kilometres, so maybe he's recovering a little bit. Just one more check, and that's on the finishing line for him. Andy Schleck in the house as Samuel Sanchez first to go. Andy will be getting ready now, then will come Alberto Contador. Schleck will be starting in just a minute or so.
Well, I don't know really with Sammy Sanchez and Denis Menchov. That's a big battle. Kreuziger is out on course. Kreuziger, he started the day in 9th position overall, and he's looking for 54 seconds in this time trial to overtake rider Hejerdal, but he's looking to defend a 25-second advantage over the American rider Chris Horner. So this will probably define the final outcome of the top 10. I think all of Spain is behind Sammy Sanchez. This man, Phil, had a very nasty accident on one of the big mountain stages the day that we climbed up to the Col du Tourmalet. He's the Olympic gold medalist in the road race in Beijing. And this small Euskaltel-Euskadi team has been around for such a long time. Many people believe they deserve a podium position.
Big moments now. He crashed yesterday. They got him back into the race 2 days ago, rather. They got him back into the race in the mountains. The race actually slowed down for him. He's not a stranger to winning time trials. He's done it in races before, but he's going to have to pull out something special against the quality of this field. More importantly, it's not where he finishes, it's how much time he can hold off Denis Menchov by. And they've only got a few seconds between them.
Yep, 21 to be precise, and that is going to be a huge battle. I would theoretically give the advantage to Denis Menchov, Phil, but you know, when you're riding for a podium position, you can put an extra special performance in, and that, I think, is what we're going to see come from Sammy Sanchez here this afternoon. He really wants to get that position, not only for himself, not only for his small Euskaltel-Euskadi team, but also for the whole country of Spain.
This is Roman Kreuziger. Might be a bit flat for him today. When he won the Tour Switzerland a couple of years ago, he won the mountain time trial. It started in the town of William Tell over in Switzerland, but that was a mountain time trial. This is very, very flat. Might not favour him now.
Different kind of course. That time trial in Switzerland started in that beautiful town, which was the hometown of William Tell, and went straight up the side of a mountain for 25 kilometres. This is different. This is 52 kilometres straight along the river of the Garonne, and all of a sudden taking us through some of the most magical parts of France and seeing some of the great chateaux that many people only ever get a chance to talk about and dream about. And we've reeved our way right the way through those chateaux here this afternoon.
Certainly nobody upsetting the leaderboard. They come and they go at 36 kilometres. Kevin De Weert's gone through, 69th best time there. Sandy Cassar's gone through at 45, just behind Bradley Wiggins, who has been caught and dropped by him, and he's gone through in 86. Now, This is the most important time trial of this man's life. He has never beaten Alberto Contador, yet he talks like he's about to do it today. I've never known a man talk so confident. He wants white for yellow, and yellow is where Contador is now, 3 minutes behind him, his bike being checked. The final thing they do is to weigh it, and then he can go and sit down and wait for the start time.
Well, Phil,
there we go.
You talk about nerves at a moment like this. Everything has been shaved off that bike to make it just absolutely perfect for the individual time trial. This is a big battle. This is the battle that we expected to happen at the start of the Tour de France, but I don't think either of us honestly really expected it to go down to an 8-second separation between Andy Schleck in white and Alberto Contador in yellow.
Absolutely not. Of course we didn't. He was the national time trial championship of his country in 2005. He's won it again this year. Now, that's not a great thing in itself. There are no great riders out of Luxembourg apart from him and his brother Frank at the moment. But he now wants to prove a point here. He's chasing about 89 meters in difference in the Tour de France between the top two.
I just listened to that crowd.
Well, he's become the people's favourite when he had the mechanical trouble that cost him his lead in the Tour de France. He stood by the roadside for 34 seconds. Contador went ahead by 8. I think by the end of this day, the 8 seconds won't matter one way or the other.
However, it has kept the suspense in there, Phil, right up to the eve of the finish of this year's Tour de France on the Champs-Élysées. Driving there past the Bourse, the trading centre of Bordeaux. There used to be a massive trading centre on the Garonne. As we start now to pick up speed, in 19 minutes time or 20 minutes time or so, we'll get an idea to see just how fast this young man is riding.
Well, it's a terrible, awesome task to leave that start house with an 8-second disadvantage, and knowing that the winner of the Tour de France, the last 2 times he's attempted it, Contador, is behind him by 3 minutes. Contador will know exactly what Schleck stops the clock at all of the checks. 18.2 kilometers, 36.2, 45.4, and the finish. Contador will know what he's got to do. It's a huge moment now. He's coming up 28 years of age, Contador, at the end of this year. And now he's going one-on-one again with the rider who he beat last year and pushed Schleck into second in the Tour de France.
Well, amazing to think that just 12 months ago, this was exactly the same situation. Contador's been in the saddle for 88 hours so far in this Tour de France, and he's still only separate. All these little maneuvers, all these little last-minute adjustments are all psychological, getting himself built up for what he knows is an extremely important time trial. He knows he's the best, but you know, when Greg LeMond went up against Claudio Chiappucci in 1990 with a 5-second deficit, LeMond knew he was the best, but in the back of his mind, there was always that slight amount of doubt.
Yes, LeMond was better, but just how much better is Contador against Schleck? Just moments of total concentration now here. He won the time trial, the Castilla-y-Leon this year, to give him the overall victory in that race in Spain in April. He won the prologue in the Dauphiné Libéré race, but he only finished second overall in that race. Now we'll see what he can do. The crowd are getting ready. They're seeing the yellow jersey of the Tour de France. They've been here since 10:30 this morning when this race started, with the first rider out of the start house. He is the 170th to leave. 10 seconds. Here comes the 5. There he goes, and the cheers, not boos now, for the man who's won the Tour de France for the last 2 attempts he's made. Now it's all down to him, and he's chasing Andy Schleck. 8 seconds between them. 3,500 kilometers ridden, and we're talking of less than 90 meters between them.
Well, what we're talking about, Phil, now is no more tactics. You throw all of the rule books away. You ride against the clock. You ride against yourself. You've got to get it into the frame of mind that you are going to do something very special. You've got to be right on the limit of your ability for the next hour or so of effort. You just might have noticed how he adjusts his aerodynamic helmet there. That aerodynamic helmet is tailor-made to fit snugly against his back to try and make the upper part of his body as aerodynamic as possible. You look at the specialized bike that he's riding there, there's hardly a gap anywhere there. He's got his front brakes in front as we go quickly back to the finishing line, because this is the arrival of Alexander Vinokourov, the teammate of Alberto Contador, and he's actually going to finish, Phil, inside of the top 25.
This is the second checkpoint for Vinokourov as he comes through here now over the little speed bump there. Not a great thing to know, having a time trial when you're concentrating. Vinokourov was 9th at the first check. He looks as though he might be slipping away a little bit, like a few riders who started out very quickly. The old story, the legs don't keep up with the heart rate and you start to drop away here. And Vinokourov is dropping down at that finishing list at the second check.
Well, Kreuziger as well is not having a great time out on the course, because at the first time check, Kreuziger has actually gone through in 48th best time. And I wonder if that's something to do with the fact that we're looking here at a rising wind coming in off the ocean this afternoon. Alexander Vinokourov knows what's going on behind him. Andy Schleck has yet to get to the first time check. Andy Schleck just started a few minutes ago and he's looking fairly good. The disadvantage that he has here is his position on the bike. You see how high up he sits there. That means that he's going to take a lot of wind onto his chest. He's not the most aerodynamic bike rider in the main field. When you look and compare the two machines that these riders have got, Phil, they both come from the same sponsor, so there's no major advantage going to come there.
Just the legs and the heart, that's all that matters right now as we pick up rider Heyerdahl out on course here. The long empty road ahead, a massive crowd. This Tour de France has been one for the people around the world for sure. Flag of Australia there. Heyerdahl, a Canadian cyclist who set Canada alight with his performance in this year's Tour de France, heading for an 8th position or better finish. This is Cadel Evans here as he comes up towards the finish now. He's waving at the people. He has not raced this. He's just coming home. The world champion doing what he said he's got to do. He's got a broken arm and it's his left arm which is damaged. It's not going to be a time to be remembered. 143rd place.
Well, I don't think that'll worry him too much, Phil. The most important thing as far as Cadel Evans is concerned is just getting himself up to Paris. Great performance here by rider Heyerdahl. He's just gone through that first time check in 22nd place. He's looking for 1.5 minutes. But more importantly, I think he's looking to try and see whether or not he can approach Joachim Rodriguez, who starts in front of them now. This is the arrival of Bradley Wiggins.
Well, Wiggins is looking to get up at least on the time of Geraint Thomas. They've been riding pretty much on the same situation. Wiggins 2 places better at all of the checks than Geraint Thomas. About 12 seconds the difference now. There's the time of Thomas. He's in 9th place with 1:04. Wiggins is coming up to the line marginally quicker. Yes, it's now the Wiggins who gets 9th place and puts Geraint Thomas down, his teammate, into 10th. But it's not a great ride by a man of this quality of performance.
Well, we were looking there at a man who finished 4th overall in the Tour de France last year, Phil, but he's coming out of this year's Tour, I don't think quite as fresh as he did last year, and maybe not quite as motivated as he was. Last year he was riding for the possibility of a podium position. Contador looking very fast here. You see the difference in the stars. Next time we look at Andy Schleck, just look at how much lower Alberto Contador is on the machine.
Armstrong now as he heads up towards the finish. The last time we will see the sprinting figure of Lance Armstrong in a time trial, winner of 11 throughout Tour history, a winner of 22 stages individually in all of his rides in the Tour de France. Armstrong is going to finish just inside the top 50 at the moment, but tomorrow he'll win the team prize with his Radio Shack team in Paris. A long way up the home straight, but look at the crowds here. They cheered him home for the last time in Pauillac. And Armstrong knows now that his career is about to be at an end.
Well, it was a magical comeback to finish 3rd overall last year, Phil, but you know, sometimes there's no such thing as a fairy tale ending to a career. I thought the ending of the first part of his career was fairy tale when he retired on the Champs-Élysées. Just listen to the crowd out there. They realize that they've just seen
The shadow on the road now as the Tour de France continues into the late afternoon. It's been running since 10:30 this morning when the first man left the start house. It seems like all day since Fabian Cancellara set the best time. A world champion starting 39th of the riders today. Now everybody remaining is on course. The yellow jersey of Contador sweeping up the field in this year's Tour de France. But is he holding on to those 8 seconds? We'll know soon.
Well, I'm getting an unofficial time check from the team car out there. In fact, Jean-François Pecher, who's in the car behind Alberto Contador, he's giving currently Alberto Contador a 4-second advantage over the man who starts in front of him, Andy Schleck. But we won't get that officially, Phil, until we get to the first time check.
We've had guessing through that first time check. Next will be Van den Broek, followed by Menchov, Sanchez, Schleck and Contador. So all that spread over about 15 minutes from the start house times. Guessing going through in a lowly 94th place, and it could be a poor result. That Ryder Hesjedal might be leaping over him as we get along towards the finish, if he hasn't started too quickly, of course.
But this is Alberto Contador, and you look at those legs, and if you were a musician, you could probably use the pedaling action that he's gone there as a metronome, because he's ticking out a very constant rhythm. It's around about a cadence of pretty close to 95 or 100 revolutions a minute. This is something that Lance Armstrong introduced into the sport when he came back to the top end of it in 1999. But he did not attribute that to himself. He said this idea of speed pedaling at a very high cadence actually belonged to a certain Miguel Indurain, who was the first rider ever to win the Tour de France at 5 times consecutively. Van den Broek has just gone through the first time check too, with a time not a bad time actually, 27th, and he's looking for a time. He's losing a time of 1 minute and 38 seconds to the world champion Fabian Cancellara. Cancellara is still the fastest man at the finish line here, ahead of Tony Martin and Bert Grabsch of Germany. So just checking out this man on the slightly undulating part of the course, Rodriguez. About to lose his number there. We've had a few problems with the numbers on the Tour de France this year, with the actual glue that's supposed to keep them on the jerseys not really working. I think it's a lot to do with the very hot weather conditions that we've had. Might have to go away and have another look at that. As you can see, quick study on his machine as we move a bit further forward here to Denny Menchov. Menchov knows he has to do a top performance here this afternoon. He wants to see whether or not he can get himself onto the podium of the Tour de France. I think the position of Andy Schleck is just a little bit too far. He would have to beat Andy Schleck by 3 minutes and 45 seconds.
So the boys behind the battle for the top 4 places seem to be pretty level. It could be a good result if Ryder Hesjedal can push on. He might climb 1 more place over Robert Gessing, but 27th fastest time for Jurgen van den Broek so far.
Yeah, well, Phil, he's looking for 2 minutes and 15 seconds to overtake Rodriguez, 2 minutes and 30 seconds to overall Gessing, and that at the moment is looking quite possible.
Well, Gessing is not a good time trialist, and it looks as though, well, I have to say it, Ryder Hesjedal can't do a thing wrong just now. This is Denny Menchov here now, and this is going to be the check for him as he gets through there. Strain your eyes. 22, he's 52 seconds off at 22:31. That has been confirmed on our computer. Hit the airwaves at exactly the same time. So Menchov has gone through there with the 7th best time of the day.
Well, that's not a bad time by Menchov, but more importantly, what he needs to know is what is his time like compared to Sammy Sanchez.
Here's Leipheimer now. Let's see what Levi's done. Last time he rode a time trial on over this distance, he won it, but it looks as though he's slipping away here. He's got pretty tired these last few days of the Tour de France. Maybe felt the pressure becoming the team leader as well when Armstrong had his problems. That's now passed over to Chris Horner, but Leipheimer going through, and he's gone through the 2nd check in only 35th place. Now that's not normal for Levi.
No, it isn't. What's more important is to see what the position of Andries Kloden was, because he may well be losing a place to his own teammate, but he still has to ride hard. They've got an 8-minute buffer over Team Case d'Epargne in the team race, and I think that, Phil, is something that they really want to take pride this afternoon in trying to win.
Still waiting. Next man will be Samuel Sanchez at the first check, and then we'll see, has he gained or lost any of that 21 seconds that separated Menchov and Sanchez at the start of the day. The lonely figure, the maillot jaune of the Tour de France, sweeping up from the back. The referees keeping all of the top names 3 minutes apart at the start. This is a lonely old day for all of them.
Well, Contador looking pretty good there, Phil. You can see the cadence is nice and high. Also, the cadence is nice and high for Andy Schleck as well. But his position is not quite as aerodynamic. He sits a little higher on the machine than Alberto Contador does, which means he's got more surface area being exposed to the wind, making him not quite as aerodynamic as he tries to cut into the wind at about 50 kilometers an hour.
He's heading towards the first check as well now, Andy Schleck.
Well, the next man to get to that first check at 18.2 kilometers will be Sammy Sanchez, the Olympic gold medalist from Beijing. Further back, flicking around to see which of the Bravets are performing well. Around those corners, nice and smoothly, Alberto Contador. At the moment, we are saying that the overall standings would be Alberto Contador 13 seconds ahead of Andy Schleck, which means so far, Andy Schleck has actually only lost 5 seconds to Alberto Contador. Now, that is a fine performance by a man who's reputedly not a good individual time trialist.
Well, we're still waiting now, and Sanchez must be very, very close to that first check now, and then we'll see just what's happening there. But there's no doubt now, at this early part of the time trial, Andy Schleck has upped his game in the time trial world.
In fact, he's just pulled a second back there, so he's now just 4 seconds separating this man from Alberto Contador. Contador, on the other hand, Phil, does have the slight advantage of knowing the times that are being posted by his closest rival up in front of him on the road.
Well, all rumours at the moment. We're waiting for the first proof of the pudding as we get to the Le Pien Médoc at Menchoff's gone through. He's the last rider through in the 7th best time. His time there was 22 minutes and 31 seconds, 52 seconds off the pace. Luis Leon Sanchez out on course as well now. He's rushing towards the finish, or towards the second point of the finish at 36.2 kilometres here. This is at Ascents-en-Médoc.
But just looking at these guys, Phil, these are good individual time trialists, some of these riders. Now, I'd have to say at the moment, it may well be that there is a change in the climatic conditions from this morning. We did expect the weather to change when the tide changed, and we did expect the riders to experience a rising headwind. And looking at guys like Luis Leon Sanchez finishing so far down at the second time check, it could well be that they are having this very difficult approach to the line.
Denis Menchov, 22.31. Sanchez, 23.19. He's lost his third place already at the first check.
At the first check, but there's still a lot of time to go, and we were expecting a turnaround in the books for Denis Menchov. He is a powerful rider. He's not rivaling the top men at all in this time trial this afternoon, Phil, but maybe he started conservatively. So he started the day looking for 21 seconds. Denis Menchov, he's already pulled back a whole big chunk of that and more as well as he pulls himself up to the top end of the overall standings. He will now be looking to see how he handles the next time check of the day, and that's at 36 kilometers covered. But for Denis Menchov, for the moment, if we were to stop the race, he would be up into 3rd spot. So Menchov has gone through that spot. There are now just 2 other riders to arrive at that first time check of the day, and that, of course, is Andy Schleck, followed by Alberto Contador. Well, Contador, the last man to start. Sammy Sanchez just went through that time check there in a time of 23 minutes and 19 seconds, and that means he's lost a good 38 seconds already on Denis Menchov. Menchov is powering along here and hoping to get himself a more solid position in 3rd.
Denis Menchov here is riding now. At the check, it's 48 seconds better than Samuel Sanchez at the first check, which means now that Menchov has got 1 foot on the podium in Paris for 3rd place.
That's what his goal was at the start of the day. He knew he was up against Sammy Sanchez. There was only 21 seconds separating these 2 riders, but Menchov is, Phil, the more powerful of the 2 men. He is a good man in the individual time trial, but so too is this man, Alberto Contador. He is not too far away from getting to the first time check. We haven't yet got the time check through from Andy Schleck, and that will be rather interesting because we get the first definitive answer as to whether or not Schleck is seriously rivaling Contador.
At the moment, we must presume that Schleck is up on Sanchez as well, if Menchov is. So Sanchez has gone through now, and Schleck must be very, very close to this first check at 18.2 kilometers. Nobody's argued with Tony Martin's time there at the moment. He's approaching the finish. It's in the distance. on the right of our picture here. You see the time check banner. Now, just where does he sit? What sort of a gauntlet is he throwing down to Alberto Contador at this checkpoint?
Well, I'll tell you what, the unofficial time, Phil, is there's only 2 seconds separating these guys out on the road currently. 23:10 is the time for Andy Schleck. Now, we've got to wait for approximately 3 minutes to get the time of Alberto Contador when he comes in. This is, Phil, going to be a bit of a battle, because I think at the moment Andy Schleck is a second faster than Alberto Contador.
Well, he's only gone through there with the 23rd best time, and he's conceded quite a lot to Denny Menchov at the moment. So he's looking at 39 seconds lost to Menchov, Schleck, and he's going to have to look over his shoulder. Is Menchov going to go right through him? He'll need a lot of time if he does, about 3 3/4 minutes, I think. But even so, we'll see. Now, the next man to arrive there will be Contador, and then we can forget all about the postulating and see exactly what the time difference is there.
Well, that's what it's all about, and we kind of forget about what else is going on in this race, because there is still a race going on, and Alexander Vinokourov is coming into the finishing straight. Not a great time by him, but he's just got another stage of his Tour de France this year, 2010, ticked off in his calendar.
Yes, Vinokourov started out with 9th best time at the first check, but as he's gone on, he's got a little bit slower here. The last time he won a time trial on the Tour de France, he was disqualified for drugs. Now he's back, and he's dropped down there to 32nd place at the finish. But he has had a pretty amazing tour on the Astana team, and he's given a lot of help to Alberto Contador.
Well, we're looking at a huge battle here. We're still waiting, looking nervously across at the computers to see what they're going to say when they stop at the first time check at 18.2 kilometres, Le Pien en Médoc. And that is when we'll get a chance to see whether what we're hearing unofficially from the race cars that are following Alberto Contador as to whether or not he's not having one of his great individual time trials this afternoon. I think that may well just have been the time check in the distance.
Well, the Radio Shack boys are not going too well. At 36 kilometres, Chris Horner's gone through with only the 81st best time, and at 45 kilometres, Cloden's got through with only the 75th best time. So there could be a big fight there for that team prize. Still waiting for the arrival now of Alberto Contador. All will be revealed as he comes up towards the finish. The number of Schleck is 23 minutes and 10 seconds. Not the best time at all, but that's not the point of the day right now.
Well, Phil, he is a long, long way from that check. Alberto Contador has been in the saddle for 22 minutes and 45 seconds, and he's still yet to get to that first time check, where the time that he has to better is 23:10. That is the time set by Andy Schleck, and he has still not got there. We are looking maybe at a very surprising turn in the books in the Tour de France this afternoon.
The computer is saying exactly the same time on the road. Now, let's see how it proves here as he gets up to that banner. I would say we are about to see a big surprise here. Contador, who was ahead, is behind at the first official check. Look at this now. We're at about the 8 seconds down as he crashes through. Alberto Contador has gone down 23:16. He leads the Tour de France by 2 seconds.
2 single seconds. That is unbelievable. Now, that will be a slap in the face to this man who has looked so confident throughout the whole of this tour.
Welcome back. Now, that 6-second time check at the first, 6-second gap rather at the first time check between Alberto Contador and Andy Schleck has since been amended. It was only 2 seconds apparently, but nonetheless, Schleck is still gaining on the leader, and there's a real race on. Let's get back to commentary.
Andy Schleck in the white jersey is pile driving on. He knows he's within 2 seconds, according to the clocks, of taking yellow by the finish of this day. And that would be, I would say, the most incredible end to a Tour de France in living memory. Contador against Schleck. They're now saying it's moving out advantage Contador. He's gone out to 3 seconds. This second time check is going to tell us something, that's for sure, as Cloden comes up into our view.
But look at his position too. He's well outside the top 50. He started off fairly well, and he too has slipped down the overall classification. These guys are getting battered by the wind. He's looking for a good 8 minutes on Fabian Cancellara.
Well, that is going to make the team race very interesting between Radio Shack and Case Depart, but now it's the race for the final single yellow jersey here, and they say that Contador is forged out now to 4 seconds on the road. and opening up that 8-second deficit, which was reduced to 2, now moved out again to 4.
Well, it still means that Andy Schleck is riding ahead of Alberto Contador on the road by 4 seconds, because that is the overall standings at the moment. He's reduced his gap from 8 to 4. Contador will know that. Contador will have to do everything he can to rival the times being done by Andy Schleck 3 minutes up the road in front of him.
Since Heyerdahl, nobody else has arrived at the 36.2 kilometre check. Heyerdahl starting at 8th from the end today. All of these boys, the flags of Australia and New Zealand on the side of the road. Contador is having the fight of his life here to win this Tour de France again, and he knows it, but I've always felt he knew it too, because he's never looked quite the sharp Alberto of the previous tours he's won.
Phil, you're looking at the man, or we're thinking about the man who last year was the winner of the final time trial. He went through the first time check in 27th position. That's not something exactly he was expecting today.
This is Denny Menchoff. So far, everything to the good. He's made a great start over Samuel Sanchez. He's now ahead of Sanchez and building a podium place if he can continue. Robert Gesink not enjoying it. He might be slipping down a place or two here. It might be in favour of Ryder Heyerdahl. Depends how they handle the next few kilometres. Luis Leon Sanchez gone through the 3rd check, only 59th there for him. At all of these checks now, the best time remains of Fabian Cancellara, who is still the best time at the finish.
Well, I have a feeling, Phil, nobody is going to see the time of Fabian Cancellara this afternoon because of this rising crosswind. It is battering the riders. It's going to be the man who is the freshest, the man who has survived the 4 days that we had in the Pyrenees, who comes out and wins this. Alberto Contador is going to have to dig deep now and find every last little bit of courage and strength that he can muster. He knows, and this is amazing to think, Phil, that Alberto Contador we've seen dominate individual time trials. I got a feeling he's on the ropes.
Well, I must say that Heyerdahl, and now as I speak, Rodriguez has gone through there in 146th place. He's nearly at the bottom of the field, and he started the Tour de France 1 place ahead of Ryder Heyerdahl. He's going to be losing that place as well to Heyerdahl at the moment.
Heyerdahl is going to move up 2 places in the overall standings, and the big battle between Schleck and Contador started at the beginning of the day, Phil, for just 8 seconds. Well, they're telling us now that these guys are riding almost exactly the same individual time trial. I wonder if Andy Schleck is thinking about brother Frank at home watching this on television, knowing that he's got to dig so deep and find that little bit more for this incredible chance that he's got of winning the Tour de France today. He realized how important it is going to be for him to do that. And what a time of Rodriguez. That time of Rodriguez is 49 minutes. 49 minutes and 47 seconds. He's lost huge chunks of time to Ryder Heyerdahl.
Well, Rodriguez is a climber, but it's got to be the wind, as you say, Paul. But the thing is, they're all getting the same quality of weather now, because that's the advantage of the Tour de France. All of the riders start in reverse order of their standings, and therefore they are getting the same weather conditions. So the strongest man will out.
Well, that's the important thing, because they are all in the top 10 in the overall standings. They are all battering exactly the same climatic conditions. And as I've said, the man who comes out the best is the man who will be the strongest on a day like this. I've got currently worked out, Phil, that Rodriguez has lost himself at 2 minutes and 25 seconds to Ryder Heyerdahl. He started with a 2 minute and 15-second advantage.
This is the arrival of Levi Leipheimer coming home now, and this has not been a great ride by Levi. He started the Tour in 5th, he slipped to 6th, he fell out of the top 10, and like everybody else, has suffered today now. Leipheimer has gone through the checks in the top 40, and that's all, and he's done a little bit better on the run-in, finishing 38th at the moment for Leipheimer.
Well, actually, I think he's done better than most of the guys in the top half of the overall standings, and he's survived this very difficult run-in towards the finish. The one man who is suffering, though, I have to say, is Chris Horner, because he, Phil, has lost 6 minutes and 19 seconds.
Well, look at Gesink. He's just gone through now in 48.51 and 105th in that second check as well. And that also means he's cracking up against Ryder Heyerdahl.
Well,
now, we're hearing on the race radio, they're now saying Schleck is 1 second in front.
He's 1 second in front on the road. The
So he's now 7 seconds behind overall.
The result we keep seeing there is the virtual position between these two riders. He was at one stage 4 seconds ahead of Alberto Contador. Now he's slipped back to a single second. So currently, if we stop the race now, he would still be second overall, 7 seconds behind Alberto Contador. But I think these times are going to shock Alberto Contador. He wouldn't have expected a resistance like this from the Luxembourger.
Well, this is going to be an incredible end to this time trial. They are fighting for the podium in Paris, all of them for the top 3 places. Denis Menchov may be winning the Czech for 3rd place overall.
This is a good time trial for Denis Menchov, though, because it's a tough time trial. The difference between him and Sammy Sanchez in the overall standings at the moment would look at a 54-second advantage for Denis Menchov, who would now have climbed up into 3rd place with Sanchez looking for 54 seconds. That is going to be difficult for the Olympic champion to try and turn around. But the big battle and the big surprise is the fact that Alberto Contador is being rivaled in the individual time trial by Andy Schleck. Andy Schleck has told us that was what was going to happen. This is going to go right down to the wire here this afternoon, because those two riders currently are riding in almost exactly the same tempo.
Samuel Sanchez racing up here now. He's lost his 3rd place for sure. 46.53 as he goes through. Now he must be close. We're waiting for the, what's the time? As Van den Broek got over him there.
Van den Broek is very close to going over him. You know, he's lost 1 minute and 20 seconds over Denis Menchov.
46.53 for Sanchez. He's more than a minute away now from the 3rd place, which he started in today. Menchov is claiming the podium in Paris alongside who in yellow? At the moment, advantage Contador. We're waiting for the 2nd check. Just 2 riders to come through at the 36-kilometer check. The computer's saying it's advantage Contador. We'll wait. He said that last time, and it was Schleck.
Well, it's only a 5-second advantage on the road currently for Alberto Contador, but he's having to really dig deep into everything that he can muster here this afternoon to keep himself in the yellow jersey. This is the kind of effort that he was making on the descent down into Saint-Jean-de-Maurienne, and he is being rivaled by the man who chased him all the way down the slopes of that mountain, because I have to say, Andy Schleck has kept something up his sleeve. His time trialling ability has gone up leaps and bounds, and his freshness at the end of this race is also assisting him to rival Alberto Contador.
Well, there's no doubt now that Andy Schleck has found something very, very special here. He has never been remotely close to Contador. Last year, he was well over a minute behind him in the last time trial. It was a different nature topography-wise. But now, he did say he would really push himself to his limits. Look at his face. Those limits are about to be reached, I think. We're still waiting for him to arrive at the 2nd check. Last man through is Sanchez, but Schleck must be quite a bit closer to Sanchez, within 2 minutes of the man in front of him now.
Well, that's what Schleck will want to do. He'll try to score another psychological battle here this afternoon. He is really turning those pedals extremely fast. We're talking here of around about 100 revolutions a minute. He's never ridden an individual time trial like this, Phil, but bear in mind, remember the Tour of Switzerland. His brother Frank cannot ride a time trial to save his life, and yet it was in the individual time trial that he won the overall victory. He didn't win the time trial, but he rode well enough to conserve his advantage and win the Tour of Switzerland by 10 seconds from Lance Armstrong.
Well, here comes the checkpoint now. It's not important for the names that go behind. It's only important for the one man who is behind, Alberto Contador. This will be the marker that Andy Schleck will set down. It was 23:10 at the 1st checkpoint. As he heads up now towards the time clock, which will stop, and then they will start for the rider chasing, who started out of the house at 3 minutes. Schleck comes up 46.36. What's it going to be as a marker now? You listen to the crowds. We are witnessing some time trial in the Tour de France this year, that's for sure. This man will drive on as he comes up through the checkpoint now. Hejadal was the last time through the other checkpoint. He's going okay there. He's in 45th place. Sanchez, the last time trial here, he's in 34th. There it is, 46.52 for Schleck. Now, what's Contador going to do?
We're going to have to wait for 3 minutes. These two riders separated on the road by 3 minutes, but Schleck does not look like a man who is weakening in this individual time trial this afternoon. I have to say, Alberto Contador will now have that information in his ears. He will know that the time to beat at that time check is 46 minutes and 52 seconds, and he wants to be as close as possible, if not in front of it.
The one thing that worries me, that time is identical to the time of Samuel Sanchez. And Samuel Sanchez is losing ground, and we don't see him as a great time trialist. Has Contador slipped back into his rhythm? This is not a course for Contador. He prefers a little bit of a climb on it. Remember, he's a man of the mountains. He hasn't got the body weight for these fast time trials. He's not a Fabian Cancellara.
Well, he's prizing the gap open just a little bit more. Theoretically, there's a 17-second gap, which means there's a 9-second gap between Alberto Contador and Andy Schleck on the road, and that is really something nobody would have put $1 on today.
Which means that Contador should stop the clock at 46:43 as he gets to that banner if the computer is reading things correctly. At the moment, he's been riding for 45 minutes and 13 seconds. He's got about 1 minute and 20 seconds to get under that banner and still be in the lead in the Tour de France.
Well, that's what the big battle is all about this afternoon, but Contador has to get himself focused, keep himself focused on the job in hand. But he cannot ride his own tempo here this afternoon, Phil. He has to ride the tempo of Andy Schleck. He's moving, it's a very strange move. He keeps pulling himself forward on the saddle. This is a man who is under pressure this afternoon. He is looking for every last little bit of advantage that he can get. He's still aerodynamic in the front end of his bike, but the fact that he's pulling himself forward means he's looking for more and more effort.
Well, this is it. He's approaching the banners here. It's just around the corner. We're in the town. And this is Archin-en-Médoc. And we've just passed the town sign now. The clock will count away. Schleck went through 46 minutes and 52 seconds. Contador needs to go through quicker than that by a few seconds. That will do to keep him in the lead. The manager must be really worried back in that car. These two men have really brought this Tour de France to Paris this year.
Well, they certainly have. The mechanic will be on the edge of his seat too, because if either of these riders has a mechanical incident at a moment like this, it could tip the scales and the outcome of the Tour de France. 46:52 is the time that Andy Schleck went through, and he's still, Alberto Contador hasn't yet stopped the clock.
It must be close now. 46:43, so the computer's wrong again here, Paul. 46:46 for Alberto Contador. 6 seconds to the good at the moment, so he leads the Tour at this point by 14 seconds.
Well, it's all going to go down to the next time check out on the road here, but Alberto Contador is up against the ropes, and Andy Schleck is the man who is throwing all of the punches here this afternoon. We've forgotten a little bit about Jürgen van den Broek, who is here. He's really riding an impressive race here, because there you can see Jürgen van den Broek there. Now, this is a bit surprising, because Van den Broek has strangely enough, had a problem, and I think out on the course we're looking here at Denny Menchov, and Menchov here really is writing the race and on fire. Menchov has caught and passed Jürgen van den Broek out on the course, Phil, so that is pretty impressive, and he's taken him for 3 minutes in the individual time trial.
Look at the face now on the picture here of rider Hajjedal. This is the finish for him. 67 minutes and 36 seconds. This man has had the most brilliant Tour de France.
Well, he certainly has a lowly position, but that's all, I think, because of the tough conditions that the last riders to start are actually experiencing here this afternoon.
Well, where are we going now? Schleck, in theory, is 13 or 14 seconds off the Maillot Jaune at this point in the time trial. He's got to beat, of course, Alberto Contador by 9 seconds to claim the race lead. And he has fought like he has never fought in his life before in a time trial.
But look at those flags. We are battling a headwind. Now that tips the scales towards the advantage of Alberto Contador, Phil, because he's a slightly more aerodynamic rider. Sanchez has dropped down into 4th place at the moment before we get to the finish line, and Jürgen van den Broek is just holding on into 3rd. But Jürgen van den Broek has just been caught and passed by Denny Menchov, who is riding a storming individual time trial.
Holding on into 4th, I think, not 3rd, but yes, Menchov is now definitely on the podium in 3rd at the moment. And Van den Broek is giving all of Belgium something to shout, because realistically he might be the 4th place man tonight going to Paris tomorrow Traditionally, the race ends here. It's always traditionally a procession into Paris, and they race out on the Champs-Élysées, usually for the sprinters. Not always the case. Breakaways do form and have done so in the past. But the race for the final yellow jersey will end today. Now, which one will it be? Alberto Contador or Andy Schleck? Certainly got two great fighters here.
Well, it's all really going to be about the last half of this race, and Andy Schleck now has really got to do something if he wants to win. So, looking at Andy Schleck here, he's in town. He's looking to keep as close as he can to the buildings, try and keep himself away from the windy part of this course. He now knows he's starting to lose a little bit of time to Alberto Contador. Contador now starting to take the advantage. He was able to rival him over the first few kilometers. He came out extremely stark. In fact, he put Contador up against the ropes because he had Contador in his sights. He was ahead of him in the first time check. Then slowly but surely he started to drift back. But still, there is not a massive difference between them. Schleck has pulled back. He's hovering a second forward, a second backwards. He's keeping himself in this bike race. And there will be a lot of discussions at the end of the tour if these two riders are separated by less than 34 seconds, because that's the time that Alberto Contador pulled back when Schleck had his mechanical incident. So Alberto Contador knows now he's got to do it. He knows he's got the advantage. He must not panic now, and he's got to hope that all of a sudden he doesn't get himself into a position of difficulty, doesn't push his body into the red zone where he can't recuperate and keep this cadence extremely high. He's in the middle of his cluster there, so you can see he's not riding the biggest gear that he's got. As this man now, Andy Schleck, starts to ride up to the banner, indicating just 10 kilometers to go. And that may well be what this tour is all about. It may well be about this 10-kilometer section now separating Contador and Schleck after 3,500 kilometers the ride around France. It's all come down to this. These two riders separated at the start of the day by only 8 seconds. Excuse me, but I think the gentlemen in that car there were a little bit nervous. Vandenbroek holding on to 5th place. Big change. Menchov overtaking Sammy Sanchez for 3rd.
As he comes through the vineyards of France here, Alberto Contador is now seeing his vision at the top end of the course. The wind is ripping across the course. He's got a few seconds, but there's no time in the scenario for a flat tire.
There's no time in the scenario for a flat tire, any kind of mechanical incident, or cracking over the last 5 kilometers. But I don't think I've ever seen Alberto Contador dig so deep, Phil, because he keeps pulling himself to the front end of the saddle. He's really looking for everything here. You know, Andy Schleck had told us he was confident throughout the whole of the last week of the race. Watch out for me in the individual time trial, and I think now we know why.
Well, the flags, those blue striped flags with the red line on them, are the regional flags of Luxembourg, which are flying, and they're all Luxembourg supporters there for sure, as Contador still remains the sweeper on today's time trial stage. And what a stage. Fabian Cancellara is going to win this race, as that is quite clear now, and he's finished this morning. He's had lunch away from the race. He'd come back to get his presentation, but the Tour de France is right here and right now. These boys remain split by just seconds.
Well, if I was Fabian Cancellara, I wouldn't be too worried about this, because all of these riders, Phil, are miles away from his time. He started in the early part of the day. The wind was not as high as it was. We had a feeling that the wind would rise in the latter part of the afternoon once the tide started to come in and once the wind started to rise off the Atlantic Ocean. And I think that is what is changing the face of this race this afternoon, and it's really making it extremely difficult for all of the riders in the top 15 to 20 places overall.
Still Cancellara, Martin and Grabs, 3 of the world's best time trialists who sit in the top 3 positions at the finish. And I don't think any of these riders coming now are going to upset that momentum. Schleck has really given us his best shot today, just as he had throughout 3 weeks of racing. Contador has never looked quite as good as 2 previous wins in the Tour de France, and he's never had to ride a time trial like this. He's never been allowed to settle in. He's been on the edge of his ability all of the way. He's 10 kilometers to go now. There'll be one more time check before he comes home.
Well, just looking at the computer, Phil, it looks as if Joaquim Rodriguez has come in with a time of 1 hour and 11 minutes. That is 11 minutes slower than Fabian Cancellara. And this is a guy who started the day in the top 10 overall.
Well, that's going to leave him possibly losing his higher place, certainly to rider Heyerdahl. And that'll put Heyerdahl up into 7th place in the Tour de France. We're waiting for Gessing's information. He might even get higher than that. This is the arrival now down at the finish of Gessing, and he also has done a ride. Look at this, at 1:09, and he's going to be a time around the time of Rodriguez, maybe a minute or so quicker, maybe a minute and a half quicker than Rodriguez. But look at it, look at that, 101st position and dropping away. About a 9:30 for him as he hits the line, 104th for Gessing.
Well, that's a massive loss of time for Gessing, Phil, because he will have lost a good 2 minutes. He may well just have held on to his position over rider Heyerdahl, but what a great performance by the Canadian.
I can't think of a time of a Tour de France time trial when all of the stars are finishing in the hundredths when they get to the finishing line. Normally, all the time trials at this stage, at least they'll make the top 25, but in the hundreds, that's almost unheard of.
Well, no, to see such a dramatic change, no, that is something that would have to go back a long time. We've seen surprise winners in the final time trial before, going back to Martinez Oliver way back in Fontenay, but the big contenders did not finish in the hundreds. This is a big charge to the line for Denny Menchoff.
Now, this is a time that will mean 3rd place in the podium to Paris tomorrow for him. Denny Menchoff, the silent assassin we call him. He's come good in the time trial, this immensely strong Russian cyclist. He rides for the Dutch Rabobank team. We should have a member of that team on the podium in Paris after this race started in Rotterdam 3 weeks ago. Denny Menchoff coming home now with a time that Sanchez can no longer match here. He's already been called down the road, by the way. Menchoff, who passed Jurgen van den Broek, that is a ride, 11th place, so it is possible from the late starters.
Well, it just goes to show what kind of a time trial this man rode here this afternoon. This is Jurgen van den Broek, Phil. He was caught and passed by Denny Menchoff for 3 minutes out on the open road. I think what it really does, Phil, is puts into perspective the performance of Denny Menchoff here this afternoon. Only 68th place for Jurgen van den Broek, who's just come in.
Well, even so, Jurgen van den Broek is going to hang on to his 5th place overall. I'm not too sure whether he'll get over the top of Sanchez yet. Would wait for his time to come in. Let's not forget the battle out on the road, though. Yellow is just marginally in front of white. And that's the situation, but they're running out of time now because they're both well inside 8 kilometres from the finish. The situation at the finish remains. Cancellara is ahead of Martin and Grabs, but the best of the favourites has just arrived, and Menchoff slotted in behind Geraint Thomas in 11th place.
Well, Schleck has just gone through that penultimate time check there, Phil, 58 minutes and 49 seconds. So in a couple of minutes' time, we'll get an indication as to whether or not Alberto Contador has still got the advantage. But you know what? His position there was only 40th place, and he's lost 5 minutes on Fabian Cancellara, his teammate.
These are huge gaps here now. Well, Sanchez has gone through, so I presume he's caught. Sanchez hasn't gone through, rather, so I presume he's been passed by Schleck. We haven't seen much of him. He's having a pretty poor ride right now, Samuel Sanchez. He may be suffering from his accident in the Pyrenees a couple of days ago. Contador is the only man that remains at the last time check at Becherville before they come down to the finish. This has been a doer time trial. The race of truth it is called, and my goodness me, that's why they are head-to-head. The two men who have appeared for 3 weeks, really, head and shoulders above the rest of the Tour de France.
Well, Alberto Contador knows that he's had a fight on his hands here this afternoon, and I have to say Andy Schleck came out very fast. It was a big risk to try and do that, but it did put the pressure onto the shoulders of Alberto Contador. But now we're starting to get into the final phases, the final few kilometres. Just a quick reminder, at the 3rd checkpoint on the road, Andy Schleck went through in 58 minutes and 49 seconds, and Alberto Contador still has to get there.
That's what we're looking at the moment, as Contador is heading up now to that situation. Andy Schleck himself is approaching the last couple of kilometres of the course here. He's going to feel the sea on his right shoulder now. But we're waiting to see Contador's time, and still Van den Broek is the last man through there at the moment. It's gone through, 58.32 for Contador, 27 seconds to the good. He's had a great 3rd leg.
Well, that's what it's been all about, Phil. He's really pulled himself very much inside out on that part of the course, as he still realizes he's got to keep this pressure on. He knows he's been under pressure from Andy Schleck this afternoon, and he's really had a serious fight on his hands. Now all he has to do is conserve that and hope that he doesn't crack over the next few kilometers. But I have to say, he keeps pulling himself forward on that saddle. This is not the fluidity that we expect from Alberto Contador. If we stop the race right now, Contador would win the Tour de France by 25 seconds.
And well, it's still going to go down as the third closest finish in history in the Tour de France. Greg LeMond won in '89 by 8. Alberto Contador himself beat Cadel Evans in '07 by 23. Then we go back to Oscar Pereiro after the disqualification of Floyd Landis in 2006. That would have been 32 seconds. This has been a battle of seconds from day one, and it's not going to change now. That is for certain. Schleck is heading home. So Andy Schleck here in a white jersey now. We're just waiting for the finish time of Samuel Sanchez, but the battle is between these two riders. It looks as though it's now sliding towards Alberto Contador, but it'll be less than half a minute.
Well, Phil, for 3/4 of this individual time trial here this afternoon, they were man against man. It was announced it was going to be man against man on the Tourmalet. That was not a surprise. We expected that. They were both great individual climbers, but all of a sudden to see this rivalry in the individual time trial makes me wonder what Andy Schleck is going to be like in a year's time, because that is going to be phenomenal. Sammy Sanchez is coming up to the finish line now, and he has lost a huge chunk of time. You know, he really is a man who's dropped down the overall standings.
Sammy Sanchez, the Olympic champion, who was on the podium until about 45 minutes ago when Denny Menchoff really got into top gear. And Sanchez now, he'll have to wait and see if he's held off for 4th place here. 1:06.47 his final time.
1:06.47, exactly 2 minutes lost to Denny Menchoff out on the course. So, you know, that's a respectable time. We now only have 2 men left, Phil, out on the course. The big rivals, 1st and 2nd in the overall standings. The men we've talked about for all of these 3 weeks of the race. We've talked about them for the last 4 days in the big mountains of the Pyrenees. Andy Schleck has done an incredible ride this afternoon, and he really has laid it to Alberto Contador.
I don't think you can do more than your best in whatever you do in life, and Andy Schleck, who was usually lost by minutes, he had a bit of a slide on the road as well, as we saw, but it looks as though Andy Schleck now is going to lose this time trial, but it'll be the narrowest and the closest he's ever been to Contador, and that all's well for the future. They give a 3 years difference in their ages. They come under 4 kilometers to go for the yellow jersey, and just the 2 riders left out on course now. Samuel Sanchez slotted in only 39th position on his finish there. And don't forget that Menchoff has finished 11th. Best of the strong men in the latter half of this course.
Well, I reckon if the weather conditions hadn't quite changed as much as they did, Denny Menchoff could have been tickling the top 4 positions on the stage at the end of the day, but he's not concerned about that. What he's more concerned about is leapfrogging Sammy Sanchez and getting himself onto the podium. Got to take my hat off to Andy Schleck here this afternoon, Phil. He played a great game over the last week of this race. He always appeared confident, whether it was the top of the climbs, the bottom of the climbs, and said, guys, watch out for me in the individual time trial. I've been training at this discipline. I've been preparing for this discipline, and he certainly has.
And he certainly resisted, too, to that first time check at 18 kilometers. He was in front of Contador, he slapped behind. 36 kilometers, a little bit more. We're into the streets now of Pauillac, as we head for the first time ever finish of a stage of the Tour de France here. Fabian Cancellara is ready for the presentation now. The world champion has done it again. He's king of his own discipline. He started 39th this morning. Before 11:30 he started, and these boys now are running to the finish at 5 minutes past 5 here. Been a long wait for Fabian Cancellara, but he's going to be the winner. 1 kilometer to go, and a wonderful crowd welcomes the white jersey for a 3rd year in a row. The only other man ever to win the white jersey in the Tour de France 3 times, Jan Ullrich. Next year, there's no white jersey for Andy Schleck. Age will have caught up with him. He'll have to go for yellow, but he's had a great time trial, win or lose. Schleck has been simply superb.
Well, he's really taken it to everyone this afternoon in the discipline which has never really been his. He's done what he can. He's tried to improve over the last couple of seasons, and today this must be the best time trial performance of his career.
Listen to the crowd as they bring him on home now. Schleck has left nothing to reserve for the finish. It's all out on the roads of Bordeaux today. He's going to be around about the same time of Sammy Sanchez, which has won 6:47. Just a little bit slower in the end than Samuel Sanchez, and it's an awful long way home. But Andy Schleck now will finish second in the Tour de France for the second year in succession. He's in 1, 7, 10 and 43rd place.
There's only one man remaining now out on the course, but I tell you, the change in the climatic conditions could really have affected the chances of Andy Schleck. Once it got a little bit tougher, once that wind started to come up, the aerodynamic position of Alberto Contador started to play in his favor. He now knows what he's got to do. He's been in the saddle for an hour, 4 minutes and 30 seconds. He hasn't got very much time now to get himself to the finish, but he will feel confident now because he now knows that he's done the ride that was required of him, and he's now looking that little bit more fluid. I think the confidence has all of a sudden come back into the head of Alberto Contador.
17 seconds ahead of Andy Schleck at the 45.4 kilometer check in Becherville. And now we're racing for the 52 kilometer check, which is the finish line of the only time trial in this year's Tour de France, not counting, of course, that short prologue in Rotterdam. It should be enough, but this Tour de France goes to Paris tomorrow. Still a matter of seconds between these two riders. It has been a superb race between them both, and Contador is going to go home from Paris tomorrow thinking, can I beat that guy next year, or will 1 year older make him just a little bit too strong? 1 kilometer to go.
This should take him at this speed around about 1 minute and 5 seconds, and that will bring him comfortably inside of 1 hour, 7 minutes and 10 seconds of Andy Schleck, and he realizes that he will have that information. He needs an hour 7:18 to keep the yellow, but what's more important, Phil, I think he's actually going to extend his overall lead in this competition at the end of the day. But I don't think at the start of this individual time trial he ever would have expected to be put so much under pressure by the young man from Luxembourg, Andy Schleck.
Look at the face of Contador, 1:6:53. It will mean he's maintained his 17 seconds advantage. He's gained and gained and gained. Contador has gone quicker and quicker over this last half of the race. When it's got really tough, he has been the stronger of the two. This is where Andy was cracking. No signs of that from Contador. He's continued to gain ever since the second time check. And as he now comes home, he will know this will be it. This has won me the Tour de France. And his time on the line is 1 hour, 6 minutes and a final kick and 33 seconds. Alberto Contador today wins the Tour de France because he knows now it's all just a little ride home to Paris. But he knew what a fight he had. That was an incredible battle, and well done Andy Schleck for making it such.
Well, that was an incredible ride by Andy Schleck, but you know, when you're a true champion, when you're looking at winning your 5th Grand Tour, you've got something special in the engine room, and that man today was bridge to engine room, more power, and the power was still there when it needed to be. When he felt that he was under pressure, he kept his calm, he kept his rhythm. What a look at this, Phil. You know, look at the top 10 in the stage this afternoon. There's nobody really who's managed to be from the top 10 in the overall standings. It's a strange result. So Cancellara getting the victory there ahead of Tony Martin, Bert Grabscher, Konovalovas up there, Dave Zabriskie of the United States in 5th place, Kirienka 7th. All of these riders a long way down in the overall standings, but the overall standing there for the general classification, Contador with a 39-second extension of his lead over Andy Schleck.
Well, as we watch the peloton literally meander through the streets now, they are 87 kilometers from the finish and about 32 kilometers or 20 miles from entering the confines of Paris.
Just looking here at the Dutch Armada, that's Robert Gessing on the right-hand side, Lars Boom alongside him, and just in front of Koos Moerenhout, who will be retiring from the sport at the end of this year. Moerenhout has been a professional since 1996. In fact, he started his career as an apprentice in 1995, with the Motorola squad before turning professional for Rabobank. He's been around for a number of years and ridden for different teams. He felt that at 36 years of age, turning 37 at the end of the year, it was time for him to call it a day. This area where we're riding here is not too far away from the heart of Paris. In fact, if we were to turn left or right at any time, we could be in Paris in around about 15 kilometers. But I think the race organization just wanted to put a few extra kilometers under the legs of the riders before they got to the Champs-Élysées. And in fact, this is the shortest stage of the Tour de France, Phil, since one of the stages was shortened because of bad weather back in 1996.
That's absolutely right. In fact, it's only 32 kilometers from Longjumeau straight into the center of Paris directly. The way these boys are going today, it is just over 100. No big rush on at all at the moment. The boys have deserved this. They've put on a great show for over 3,600 kilometers. And I think this year the organisers were ready for it because they put no special sprints for the green jersey on the approach to Paris. They put both the competitions for the sprint at the top end under the Arc de Triomphe on the Champs-Élysées, and then the race is full on. So there could be some exciting sprints for that. Mark Cavendish will want to keep a close look on it, because if Mark Cavendish does win today, he is in with a chance of winning the green jersey. And it's never been done by an English rider, by the way, or by a British rider either. But he's just got to hope that Pataki misses out behind him.
Well, it could be a big battle, and it may well be suitable for these riders of the sprinters to allow a break to get off the front end of the main field. But if the race is together, I wouldn't be surprised to see Mark Cavendish having a go at that. A lot of people have written in asking about the last man in the overall standings. Well, for a long time it was Bert Grabsch. Nobody actually wants to be last in the Tour de France, and I know that from experience, but Bert Grabsch was last man for a long time. But in fact, he finished third on the stage yesterday with a phenomenal time trial performance, and he actually leapfrogged the rider in front of him, and he's no longer last overall. Lanterne Rouge, as they call it, is Adriano Molari of Team Lampre, 4 hours 26 minutes behind.
That's away.
Well, Dr. Gérard Porte in the car there, just having a quick chat with the world champion, and the world champion has struggled throughout this whole Tour de France. He got himself the yellow jersey, let's not forget, on one of the Alpine stages, but this man has had a Tour de France once again dogged by ill luck. In fact, he is riding this event with a cracked bone in his elbow. Nothing that would be life-threatening or threatening to the rest of his career, but certainly it has been extremely painful.
Continuing to look at the peloton as they just enjoy what is a cloudy day, but a most pleasant day for a bike ride.
No, it certainly is. Not too hot. This race in the early part really was dogged by incredible heat. Canicule, as they call it in France. The heat where a few years ago saw a lot of people actually passing away because of the heat, especially in the old people's homes. And this year they took great precaution. And in a lot of the old people's homes, before the start of this summer, they actually they installed air conditioning units, because the temperature in some parts of France was touching 40 degrees Celsius. Now, that might not be out of the ordinary for places like Africa or South America or Australia, but when you get those kind of temperatures in Europe, it really is very difficult to take.
Yeah, no, it is absolutely right. And on certainly 2 nights this year, it was extremely oppressive. Well, no further action at the back of the Tour de France. Remember that Alberto Contador, when he wins today, it'll be his 3rd win. The Spanish have got the grips on this race after a long dearth of victories in the Tour de France. Along came Miguel Indurain. He got the win 5 times. Miguel came and watched the race. Well, I don't know whether he actually watched the race. We came and joined in with the festivities on the rest day in Pau, which were on top of the Col du Tourmalet. And he was up there with a lot of the stars of the sport.
Yeah, Phil, we were just talking a little while ago about the last man in the overall standings, Adriano Malori from Team Lampre. I just worked out that at the average speed of the race so far, if we worked it out, he would be 176 kilometers behind.
My goodness.
So this is now the small town of Vaolin, and there you can get a quick chance to see l'église of Saint-Rigomer and Saint-Ernestine. It's a 13th century church which was enlarged in the 17th century, restored once again in the 19th century, and it's noticeable because of the square bell tower that it's got with buttresses and the saddleback gabled roof, which dates back to the 13th century. And the number at the back, number 21, that's also a very famous number in this Tour de France, because that's on the back of Lance Armstrong, who will finish his 13th Tour de France here this afternoon. and he will not return as a competitor to the Tour ever again. Although there is rumour and innuendo as to what races he will continue to participate in, he doesn't want to stop being competitive, and he's talked about riding races like the Santos Tour Down Under in Australia in January. He's talked about riding the Cape Epic in South Africa, a multi-day mountain bike race, and of course one of his big goals is to try and ride the Hawaiian Ironman triathlon, and he certainly is still looking extremely lean and mean, although we met him the other night when we went out for dinner on a boat with him on the Garonne just outside of Bordeaux, and he was looking like a rather tired bike rider. He said this has been a very difficult Tour de France, and I think it has for everybody, and I think it's a lot to do with those hot nights that we've had, because many of the riders have complained that they've not been able to recover quite as easily as possible. Just having a quick chat with his teammate there, Levi Leipheimer. Leipheimer cracked a little bit in the last few days in the Pyrenees and of course in the individual time trial, and didn't finish quite as high up as he hoped to. He had been dreaming and nurturing hopes of a possible podium finish. Well, his finishing place in the Tour this year is likely to be 13th at 14 minutes and 40 seconds. And there's the man who wears the upside down number 13, Fabian Cancellara, the winner of the individual time trial yesterday. Although he'd said in the early part of the year, he has a nickname in the sport of cycling, Spartacus. And although he said that he doesn't like that nickname at all, I actually saw him in the finishing pen yesterday, and he's actually got Spartacus written on the back of his jersey. So obviously whether or not he likes it, the team seem to. Well, I had said earlier on that the number on Lance Armstrong's back would not been put on properly. This is a quick lesson in how to put on a race number, and the olden-fashioned way of doing it with safety pins. The majority of these numbers, they actually do have an adhesive on, but for some reason this year I think there's been a problem with the supplier, because the adhesive is certainly not working.
This is Koos Moerenhout having a chat with Robert Gesink, the young and the old, and as we say goodbye to Koos, who's been a great competitor over the years. On the right here, Gesink, who crashed last year and retired with a broken wrist, has come good this year. Finally, one would say, has delivered a big result in a major race for Holland, because we've always said Paulie's a real talent. He's finishing 6th.
Yep, and just looking at Mr. Armstrong decided he wanted, for his last day on the Champs-Élysées, Phil, if there were any photographs that were going to appear of him, he actually wanted to make sure that his number was put on properly. It's slightly cockeyed and skew there, but at least it's not flapping in the wind as it was before.
Well, with all the champagne being drunk in the peloton, they'll just think they're getting a bit high on the alcohol right now. They won't notice.
So, Koos Moerenhout, he too tapping out his last tour. He turned professional back in 1996, and in fact in the early part of his career he had a couple of months as an apprentice on the Motorola squad alongside Max van Heesewijk, who ended up being an extremely good professional bike rider. Look at the Norwegian flag there. There are hundreds of Norwegians at the finish line today, sporting everything from Norwegian flags to Norwegian t-shirts to Norwegian shorts, as they've all come down here to support their man Thor Hushovd, and of course the new kid on the way up, Edvil Bosenhagen from Team Sky, and he has really tried to mix it on some of the flat stages. All the excitement at the side of the road, and everybody just enjoying the coverage from France Television. France Television once again doing a phenomenal job as we look at Koos Moerenhout here. He's raced in the Olympic Games. He finished 26th in the Olympic Games in Sydney as he meanders off the front. I think he just wants to get this race over and done with. Everybody for the moment just quite happy to cruise along, and I don't think you can complain too much about this, because these guys have raced very hard for the last 3 weeks of racing. 22 days ago since we left Rotterdam with the individual prologue time trial, which was won by Fabian Cancellara. And I was quite amazed to remember yesterday that Fabian Cancellara had never actually won one of the long time trials in the Tour de France, and yesterday he put that to right with a very emphatic win. I would question whether or not if the weather conditions hadn't changed, he would have got the victory, because there was a huge wind came up for the riders who raced in the last half of the event. And that, I think, falsified the result a fraction, but that's why all of the men in the top end of the overall classification start at the back end of the afternoon, so the conditions are the same.
So everybody happily just looking at the camera. It's funny how they know where the camera is as they continue to pass through pictures. There's Andy Schleck. He's moved down the line just a little bit here. I've made a check there, I think, with Fabian Weckman. At the back here, number 31, is Bradley Wiggins. who isn't too pleased with his Tour de France, chatting with the British rider Jeremy Hunt.
Well, he tried to do a time in the time trial yesterday. He thought he was going to come up with a good performance. He ended up in 9th place, but he too is one of the riders who started in the latter part of the afternoon, really getting some of the worst weather conditions. This is a big revelation this year in the Tour de France meet. Ryder Heyzedal started life off as an extremely good mountain biker, rode the Olympic Games in the cross-country mountain bike before passing across to the road, and he was actually first picked up as a professional bike rider on the road by Johan Brunel before he moved across to Garmin Transitions. Former German champion on the far side, Fabian Wegman, in fact former 2-time champion. I'm just looking down there at that amazing lake. That looks very similar to me to the lake at the Chateau of Versailles, as we get a chance to have a look. And if it is Versailles, we're just a little bit off the race route. Maybe we've been brought down here just to have a quick glimpse at it. And I wouldn't be surprised. I would say the French are extremely proud of their chateaus and their heritages here this afternoon. Really is remarkable, the heritage that France has got, and that's the one thing I think a lot of people really enjoy about watching the Tour. It's not just watching the bike races make their way and meander around this magnificent countryside. In fact, it's not the Chateau of Versailles, very similar in architecture, but this is in fact the Chateau of Sceaux. And the park around it occupies an area of 181 hectares. It was originally commissioned by Colbert, and he was in fact one of the early owners. It was designed by André Le Nôtre, and the reason it's known as the Chateau of Sceaux is because it links the communes of Sceaux, and that is not too far away from Antony, which is the next town that we'll be going through in a few moments. Spanish flags. It's surprising to see a lot of Spanish flags and a lot of Spanish immigrant workers in the outskirts of Paris here, and they will all be turning out to support the man that they want to win the Tour de France this year, and that of course is Alberto Contador. And he's a good representative of Spain because he comes right from the very heart of Spain. He's neither Basque nor Catalan nor from the south. He's actually from the capital city of Madrid, in fact from a little small town just in the outskirts called Pinto. So I don't think it will be very long before we start to see the slight acceleration coming. And Nicholas Roach, the young Irishman, reading in the newspapers that Sky team are very keen to try and sign him up for next year, and they're trying to build up a very big English-speaking squad. And Nicholas Roach's dad was the only British. Let me get that again. The only person from the British Isles, I would have to say, to win the Tour de France, and he was the first person to win for Ireland. And Nicholas Roach's son coming across the line in 15th place, having put in a very fine performance on the Tourmalet. I was talking to Sean Kelly just a couple of days ago, and he felt that Nicholas maybe should have lost himself a little bit of time because he could get himself a bit more publicity out of actually going for individual stage wins. But I think Nicholas at the moment is looking to try and to get himself into the same kind of bike rider that his dad was, and trying to get himself into the top 10 of the Tour. And why not a win for Ireland after so many years ago? But Stephen Roach was the man who conquered that in '87. But what a year that was for Stephen Roach, because not only did he win the Tour de France, he was also the winner in the same year of the Giro d'Italia and the World Championships, equaling the record of Eddie Merckx, the only other rider in history to be able to accomplish that feat. "73 kilometers to go to the finish." We've gone through the small town now of Châtenay-Malabry. There's Stuart O'Grady coming up to the front. O'Grady in the black and white jersey of Team Saxo Bank there. Lots of question marks at this time of the year. It really is the rumour mill, the Tour de France, because although the official transfer season doesn't start until August, then a lot of riders know that if they don't have a contract signed by the end of the Tour de France, then they're going to have difficulty actually closing out the deal, because everybody is here at the Tour, or every team that you want to be a part of is at the Tour, and so are all the management and all the managers too. And it's here that everybody is seen talking in little quiet whispers in the corridors and the bars of the restaurants and the hotels that the riders stay at, and we eventually find out whether or not those are true towards the end of the year. There are rumours and innuendo that Team Saxo Bank is going to lose some of the top riders, including the Schleck brothers and possibly Stuart O'Grady and Fabian Cancellara. Rumours that are being completely denied by Bjarne Riis, who says it's no problem at all. I've got my sponsors for the next season signed up and ready to go. and will be keeping the team as intact as possible. But all of those stories will be stories to follow over the next month or so, and we'll find out just exactly what's true and what isn't. Quick glimpse at the back there. I just noticed Matty Lloyd. Matty Lloyd finishing his second Grand Tour of the season, having won the King of the Mountains in the recent Giro d'Italia, and now having been an integral part of Jürgen van den Broek's 5th place overall. 72 kilometers to go, and we won't be too far away now from starting to get to the outskirts of Paris. There's the Chateau of Malabry, or should I say Le Valais aux Loups, the Maison de Chateaubriand. And this area here, in fact, used to belong to an extremely well-known writer, François-Auguste René, who was the Viscount of Chateaubriand. He was an incredible writer and a politician who wrote a book called The Valley of the Wolves. Stayed in this chateau for 10 years while he spent the time to develop the house and planted orchards, and he imported a lot of very rare plants from his travels all around the world, and it's got a very, very interesting arboreum. In 1826, this property was rented out to Madame Recamier, who used to spend her summer months there. And in 1914, it was bought by Dr. Le Savareau.
And smiles there from Anthony Charteau, who has been riding extremely well, and he's had a nice 3 days holiday since he left the Tourmalet. He's managed to come up through Bordeaux and ride the time trial, now into Paris. No hills at all. That's the first time I can ever recall that being the case. Of course, we paid full tribute to the Pyrenees, celebrating 100 years of being in the Tour de France. And so they made the Col du Tourmalet the final climb, and Anthony won the King of the Mountains right then and there. Looking at the polka dot bicycle here, Paul, and it's not a nasty case of the measles. It is specially sprayed up for the winner of the King of the Mountains.
Yeah, probably built up very rapidly over the last couple of days. He's having a chat here with the rider from Case d'Epargne, and the reason for that is he in fact used to ride for Case d'Epargne and was on that team for a couple of seasons, but probably we know him more, Phil, for having won the Tour de Langkawi a number of years ago.
Yes, the French rider on Case d'Epargne there, Mathieu Peugeot. He's been pretty active in his first Tour de France as well. And everybody's happy to be going home, of course. But there is still a battle to ensue, and that is for that green jersey, currently led by Alessandro Petacchi, who has been also renowned as one of the fastest sprinters in the world, but he's going to have to take on the fastest sprinter in the world right now, Mark Cavendish, when we do come down to the big finish. Cavendish is continuing to win stage in the Tour de France, but he's a winner, Paul. He doesn't like finishing second, and of course you've got to be consistent to win the green jersey.
That's the important thing. You've got to be knocking away all the time. Bon courage to Laurent Fignon. And interesting, we talked about the start there with the 28 million people living with cancer. Well, Laurent Fignon is one of those too.
He is, and he's fighting on as well, and he works here. He's only allowed to work 10 minutes every hour, but he fights on. Laurent Fignon, twice a winner of the Tour de France, and the man who lost the Tour de France in 1989 to Greg LeMond by those 8 seconds. Fignon is coming good, but he's fighting all of the way, and represented today by the 28 million who are suffering from cancer around the world.
Well, just
nice chat going on here between the world champion Cadel Evans and Brett Lancaster, two Aussies at the back together.
Yeah, just going back to, we were talking a little bit about Alessandro Petacchi, Phil. Well, if Petacchi does win the green jersey at the Tour de France this year, he'd be the first Italian to win that title in 42 years. And the last man to do that was Franco Bitossi, and you remember him back in 1968.
I do. He was the one that used to sit under a tree with a bad heart, then get on his bike and win. That's a long time ago, that, Paul. I can't believe you're that old.
Well, we've got to pull plenty of statistics out this afternoon to keep the things rolling along. Tour de France 2010, merci France 2. Thank you very much to France Television. I suppose we would have to say thank you to France Television as well. That's where we're going, and if you don't know what Paris is all about, well, that is what it's all about. There is the Eiffel Tower right in the middle, and the Eiffel Tower, well, it shouldn't be there, really. It was designed by Gustave Eiffel, who lived between 1832 and 1923. 317 meters high. It was only put up for 4 years, but would Paris look the same without it now? Oh, what's going on here? Now, again, Andy Schleck has been up and down the back end of this main field like a yo-yo this afternoon, having quick chats with the team management and making sure that everything's fine. He obviously doesn't want a mechanical incident on the final few circuits, because although the race situation is pretty much locked in with Andy Schleck in second place behind Alberto Contador, you have to finish on the final day. You have to finish in the same time as the main field, and if you're not careful, 39 seconds is nothing at all, and that could disappear in the blink of an eye. Just going through one of the outskirts here. This is Plessis-Robinson, and again, these are all very much just the suburbs of Paris. Paris is a very concentrated city. In fact, Paris is the most concentrated inhabited city in the world, because there are so many people actually live in the city. Most of the modern cities of the world, people actually live outside and they commute into it. But Paris is different, because people actually live right within the walls of the city.
Very good point, and very commutable too if you live out at the start today as well in Longjumeau. But I often muse that the population of generally around London, not in and out of London, is the population of the whole of Australia. So you can imagine how many people in our city.
No, absolutely. 20 million people living in the greater London area, and not that many people live in Luxembourg, and this man is certainly probably going to turn out to be one of the most famous Luxembourgers since the time of your great hero Charlie Gaulle, who was nicknamed the Angel of the Mountains.
Yes, Charlie was fantastic in the 50s and early 60s, and sadly he's only just passed away, Charlie Gaulle, but he was the man that was known throughout, as Paul said, the Angel of the Mountains. He could climb, believe me, and climb tremendously well. And so he would have been delighted to see the quality of the Luxembourg riders now. Kim Kirken is another one, but these two boys and their brothers, Frank and Andy Schleck, have become the cyclists out of Luxembourg this decade. This decade, or even this century.
Well, I have to say, you know, it is going to be great, I think, to see Frank Schleck come back to the Tour de France next year. And I think we'll go away from this Tour de France filled with lots of discussions and lots of ifs and buts and what if. What if Frank Schleck hadn't crashed and he'd stayed in the Tour de France to be alongside his brother Andy?
Yeah.
I reckon the two could have been an incredible duo, and they really could have put Alberto Contador up against the barrier. Let's not forget that Frank Schleck, just before the start of the Tour de France, he won the Tour of Switzerland, so he's in pretty good form.
He was, and he won it in a time trial, which surprised even Frank. He'd gone home. They had to go and get him to come back for his first prize and to win the Tour outright. So that was a big result for him. Back to the rear of the race here with #1, Alberto Contador. But he's now checking out his teammates. He's come up and alongside Maxim Iglinski, another top rider on the squad from Kazakhstan, of the Astana. Astana, by the way, in case you don't know, is the capital of Kazakhstan. And as the money comes in from a number of major corporates within the country, they've stood neutral ground, and it's sponsored by the capital of Kazakhstan, which is Astana.
Yeah, well, most of the big companies in Kazakhstan have got behind the team, and the big sponsor obviously is the Kazakhstan National Oil Corporation, and of course the National Railway System as well. But they do basically want to advertise the country. And one thing that Alexander Vinokourov did, very much like the footballers, people don't try and win stages for themselves. He wanted to win that stage not only for the team Astana, but he actually wanted to win it for the people of Kazakhstan.
I actually met an old friend of mine today who's from Kazakhstan. He's now the president of the Kazakhstan Cycling Association, and he's here because he's brought the senior members of the government to the finishing line today to watch the end of the Tour de France. So they're going to be pleased with the way the team has ridden, that's for sure.
Well, they have, you know, leading up to well, the end of last year, when the team started to split and Armstrong ran off and formed a Radio Shack and took a whole chunk of the riders with him. All of a sudden we had a situation where people started to say, oh well, if Alberto Contador stays with Astana, he's not going to have a team to support him. But we noticed leading up to the Tour in May in the Criterium du Dauphiné, and then later on in the races like the Tour of Switzerland, all of a sudden Team Astana was starting to look like a team en bloc that could support Alberto Contador, and they didn't really put a foot wrong in this race.
They were never. I was always suspect that Contador wasn't quite on top of his game, but he never made a mistake. And he just brought about the fact that if you're going to win a Tour de France, you really do have to hurt yourself and suffer. And I believe that Contador has dug especially deep this year. This has been far from an easy victory, and I would say probably the toughest of his 3 victories here in winning the race this year. as the riders now gently get in. We're about 12 kilometres from entering the outskirts of the city of Paris. Looking down on the big metropolis of Paris, needless to say, no breakaway at the moment. The whole peloton, they've lifted the tempo a little bit, that's for sure, because we are now inside 10 kilometres before we enter the city of Paris.
Yeah, I mentioned a little earlier the little town of Verrières-le-Buisson, which is a town that I used to live in. I also used to live in the town that we're going through now, Issy-les-Moulineaux, and it's about 1.5 miles from the border of Paris, or the outskirts of the city of Paris. And it is in fact the home, of course, of the Armoury Sports Organisation, which is the organisation which owns the Tour de France and many other sporting events as well, including, of course, Paris-Dakar.
Yep, we often go to their offices and we see the motorbikes and the cars, the Paris-Dakar plates on them.
I just wonder, why do they call it Paris-Dakar anymore? Because nowadays it's in Argentina.
It got moved. It's true. They had a lot of problems with
terrorism in Mauritania.
Yep. They were very worried about the situation there, so they have moved it down to South America, but they still hold it. And in the motoring world, or the rallying world, it's as famous as the Tour de France. Well, here we are now as we go through Issy-les-Moulineaux, not very far away from the offices of L'Équipe as well, the sporting newspaper where this race all began. And the boys now have lifted up the pressure just a little bit. This is just too much to hold them back. They want to now think of the Tour de France wending its way onto the banks of the Seine.
Yeah, we're not really very far away from getting to the Place de la Concorde. There's still a number of riders from HTC Columbia sitting at the back end of the main field. That will not be the situation over the last couple of laps, because the riders in the white, yellow and black strip of HTC Columbia, I'm sure, will be all over the front end of the main field. Habitually and historically, normally it's the team of the yellow jersey that amass at the front end of the main field and start to pick up the pacemaking in an effort to take the main field onto the Champs-Élysées at high speed. Then after that, they release the reins of the race, and it's a flurry of attacks that usually follows, of riders trying to get themselves into a breakaway and off the front end of the main field.
Well, there's a nice little backwater down on the Seine there. Probably just navigation canalized off the main river, which has made nice little parking up there for the houseboats. For the riders today, that's salute the organizer of the Tour de France, ASO there, the offices. The riders look across a little bit. Christophe Moreau, as the riders now go past the offices of the Armoury Sports Organisation.
Well, they're just about to actually cross over the Seine, and that means they're not too far away, maybe a kilometre or so away from going into the outskirts of the city of Paris. And if you look at the back end of the main field now, Phil, you can actually see that the race is about to begin in earnest.
Yes, and watch out for these boys at the back. These are the teammates of Alessandro Petacchi. They're not going to be at the back much longer now. They'll be very attentive at the front. They'll keep an eye on the green jersey, their team leader. They'll also look out for Thor Hushovd, the champion of Norway, who could take that jersey away if it all fell into the right order. And the same for Mark Cavendish. Mark doesn't hide his cards. Simple tactics. He's going to win the sprint. He won't go in any of the moves. He'll just let his team chase down whatever happens, and he'll look to win the sprint as he did last year. He may have a problem though, Paul. He's coming off that last corner with no help from George Hincapie. Last year was on the same team. No help from Mark Renshaw, no longer in the race.
He didn't need any of those guys, though, Phil, when he charged into Bordeaux, and he will have to sprint, as he said in his own words, in the old-fashioned way. He'll have to leap from train to train and see whether he's got enough wit to find the door that opens up in front of him and get across the line first. The big advantage about the sprint on the Champs-Élysées, Phil, is it is a very big, wide boulevard, and the rider's going to get 8 attempts at getting themselves into the right position to cross that line. And it's a road that really normally doesn't have that much confusions in the sprint.
So the boys from Garmin Transitions, mixed theories for them this year, because they lost 3 riders along the way, sadly with broken bones. Christian van der Velde, a big push for the overall. He has had a 4th in the past. Also their top sprinter Tyler Farrow went out, similar problems. He soldiered on for a while, but in the end the pain proved too much. And Robbie Hunter, the South African cyclist, who also broke a bone in his elbow. There are 3 top men there who could have got a big result for Garmin out of the race in the first 8 days.
Well, this is a magical road. If you ever get to Paris, this is a road that you seriously have to take because it goes all the way along the side of the Seine. You can see the Seine over to the right-hand side. This is what is known as the Voie Georges Pompidou, after one of the former French presidents here, and it takes in some magnificent sights. And in fact, it's on the opposite bank. This is the northern bank of the Seine, and it actually goes right away along some of the greatest sights we've got to see. And a little bit further along this road, we should get a chance, Phil, to see the Eiffel Tower. And I'm hoping to see, in fact, the original Statue of Liberty, because there's a model of the copy of the Statue of Liberty in the middle of the Seine here, holding its original name, which in fact was Liberty Lighting the World.
Well, it's just onto the right, isn't it? Very close to it at the moment, if the camera does pick it up. But these are the boys now. They know when they've got the Seine on their right shoulder that they are actually in that Paris area, and they'll be heading onto the circuit. They actually go onto the circuit with 55 kilometres to race, so just on 6 kilometres to the actual entry of the Place de la Concorde, first time through.
Well, we've
the entry to the circuit.
Yeah, the entry to the circuit. They come charging off the Voie Georges Pompidou across the Place de la Concorde, and then they go right round the Jardin de Tuileries, and then in front of the massive Museum of the Louvre, and then they start the circuit in earnest. And once they cross the finishing line, they face up to 8 laps of that finishing line. That's the home of France Télévision, and we have to say, I suppose, Phil, a great big thank you to them, because some of the images they've broadcast of France this last 3 weeks have been magnificent, especially the aerial shots from the helicopters, who've done a great job. And sometimes I imagine that we're actually looking at a tripod in the sky at some of the images they managed to portray.
Well, I get continually lost when I drive in the centre of Paris looking for the ASO, and that's the building I always look for, Paul, is France Télévision, and then I know I'm not very far away.
That's the back end of the main field. Cadel Evans, a world champion, a title which he won last year in Mendrissi, and a title he's hoping to defend when he goes down to Australia, Melbourne and Geelong towards the end of the year. The riders from Astana now slowly moving up to the front end of the main field. Very shortly they'll get themselves organised in a big long line and start to pick up the pace as they hope to lead Alberto Contador at the front end of the main field onto the Champs-Élysées. There, once again, you get a chance there just to have a quick look at France Television. It's 100% owned by the French state, created in September 1992.
That's the view, I guess, that all the cyclists. There's the congratulations going on here at the back of the race, Paul. His big moments. That was Martin Mascant of Garmin Transitions at the back there.
Well, there you can see that is a magnificent backdrop of Paris this afternoon. We were a little bit concerned, I think, Phil, that it may well be a rainy day in Paris. Well, that's certainly not going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen anyway, but it certainly looks like a sun-bathed race.
Well, you don't get many views like that, do you? This famous city is welcoming home the Tour de France, as it has done since 1903. The Champs-Élysées is the next stop. Well, as we look down here now, just above the Trocadero and far away from the Eiffel Tower, the riders are coursing along the banks of the Seine. They're approximately just 3/4 of a mile from the finish as we now look over Les Invalides.
Well, Les Invalides are very important as well, a former military hospital. And in fact, if you look at the Golden Dome there, in fact, it's underneath that Golden Dome that Napoleon Bonaparte is actually buried.
Well, I have to take your word on it, Paul, but I'm sure you're right.
Well, I know all this stuff. I used to spend lots of time when I used to go out training.
Every time I come on the Tour de France. Well done. But the riders themselves, well, we haven't forgotten the Tour de France. After all, people come to France, and it's a very diverse country. It's got just about everything. And as Paul has often told us, that's why the French never leave the country to go on holiday, because they can find everything so diverse in their own country, and it's why everybody wants to come here. And many, many people, I know because you write and tell me so, watch the Tour de France because you want to know where it's going so that you can go in on your holidays after the Tour de France is finished.
Well, now we're getting, we've just come underneath the Place de la Concorde. We're riding alongside the Jardin de Tuileries. And the reason, I'll get this little piece of information out of the way early, the reason they call it the Jardin de Tuileries, in fact, it used to be a quarry where they quarried clay to make the roof tiles that abound around the majority of Paris.
Now, I think it's only fitting and to be expected that there's a semblance of tradition now come onto the front. We saw it for 7 years with Lance Armstrong. His team did all of the work under 3 different titles. Now it's the Astana team bringing Alberto Contador onto the Champs-Élysées. I'm sure they'll guide him through the finishing line to start the actual circuits, of which there are 8. And then it will be every man for himself to see if they can set it up to win the day. It must be a tremendous feeling when you arrive here in the maillot jaune. And over these last few years, of course, the shorts are also changed to yellow. The bikes are sprayed overnight into yellow. The pedals are yellow. You must feel as though you've got jaundice.
Into the dark now, and coming out on the other side, they will ride up on the Rue de Rivoli, which is a magnificent road which will lead the riders back towards the Place de la Concorde. And of course, as we pull back here, we get a chance to see the Maid of Orleans, Joan of Arc.
Now this is the left turn here now. As we head down the Tuileries, you'll see the big Ferris wheel any minute now as the riders right below the camera there, making their way around. This is a big moment here. Now once they start, they will still have a long way to go once they get underneath this. They've crossed the finishing line for the first time. They've got 52 kilometres to race, but because of the nature of the race now, you can reckon that that will take them little more than 1 hour to finish off the Tour de France over the Louvre.
Yes, and the rather controversial glass pyramid, which was ordered on the wishes of the President of the Republic at the time, of Francois Mitterrand. And if he hadn't ordered it, we wouldn't have had a brilliant movie like The Da Vinci Code.
Nor would we have a very nice glass pyramid as well.
But we're not about visiting Paris this afternoon. We've had a great view of a number of the backdrops. There's Sacré-Cœur just in the top there, on the top of the hill, looking down over Paris, as we now come over the Place de la Concorde, which, by the way, used to be called the Place Louis XV until it was changed to be the Place de la Révolution, and eventually becoming the Place de la Concorde. Onto the Champs-Élysées now, and the riders will come up to the finishing line, and they will see a board which will indicate to them 8 laps to go.
Well, there it is, Paul. Astana doing him proud, bringing all 9 riders home, and the yellow jersey sitting contentedly behind them all as they now move up the Champs-Élysées. It's now 8 circuits and 52 kilometres to go.
Yes, this is a magical moment, Phil, for any bike rider who's ever ridden the Tour de France to actually get to this point, because you know what has gone through your mind. You know the suffering that you've had, you know the falls that you've had, you know the times that you've risked elimination, and finally, once you get here, you've made it.
It's a wonderful feeling, and it's a great achievement whether you're winning the race or with the last man finishing over 4 hours behind Alberto Contador. It doesn't matter, you've completed the Tour de France, and they can't take that away from you. Now you're seeing the cobblestones we often talk. Don't believe it. There's a puncture to George Hincapie right as they started. A bit of a chase now for Hincapie to get back on, because this is no longer a pleasant ride into Paris.
Well, that's certainly, if you're going to have a flat tyre on the Champs-Élysées, you might as well have it on the first lap, because if you have it on the second or first from the end, you ain't going to get back into the race. But it's still a very hard chase for George Hincapie, because the pressure is on at the front. What a magnificent backdrop, Phil. The Arc de Triomphe at the top of the Champs-Élysées closed down for a simple bike race.
Let me remind you that George Hincapie, when he rode alongside Lance Armstrong, was one of the cyclists who rode every Tour and finished with Lance Armstrong that Armstrong won. George changed teams this year to go alongside the world champion Cadel Evans as he starts to run down his career. And he's been not really the rider that we've seen in the past this year, but then that was probably because Cadel Evans, his team leader, also with the crash, wasn't the rider that we expected either in this year's Tour de France. There's the Arc de Triomphe, the tomb of the unknown soldier. They turn short of that, a very tight turn as well, and then race down the other side. Now George needs to get on as he's on the way up here, because they'll go down the other side in excess of 60 kilometres an hour.
Yeah, the horrible thing, if you're a professional bike rider, is the average speed on these finishing circuits is around about 54 kilometres an hour. It's 48 kilometres an hour or so on the way up to the top of the Champs-Élysées, and then, as you say, 60 kilometres an hour on the way down. And you watch how, from all of a sudden being a compact peloton, this group of riders is stretched out into a very long line.
Life goes on as the circulation, the traffic goes around the Arc de Triomphe. They don't close that off. They would really seize up Paris. But the riders now coming away. I don't know if you noticed, Paul, there is an absolutely massive crowd on the Champs-Élysées. One of the biggest I've seen for years.
Yep, they've been out actually for a long time. I didn't expect to see so many people so early on. People came out 3 and 4 hours before the race even started to get their position on the Champs-Élysées.
Well, there's the downhill I'm telling you about. Crane your neck, see if you can see the lone figure. I did, I just saw him. Hincapie's about 7 or 8 cars down at the moment, still trying to bridge the gap up to the group. But look at this at the front now. You see they're trying to get a breakaway clear. Now, last year, they only just caught it before the finish, and then Cavendish finished it off with Mark Renshaw. But there's a little group of 8 or 9 going.
Well, all of a sudden, you see that organisation. Immediately, that group started to look rather large. HTC Columbia came to the front. They want to shut it down. I would be surprised, Phil, as we look at the Grand Palais over on the right-hand side there, to see Mark Cavendish going for these intermediate sprint points. But you don't know. Cavendish has said before the start of this race he wants to win stages, but he did say at the start of the year he wanted to win the green jersey.
Well, if Cavendish wins, statistics tell us that his main rival, Alessandro Petacchi, must finish no worse than 6th. If he finishes 7th, he'll have the same points as Cavendish would have, but Cavendish would win because he's won more stages than Petacchi. So it's dicey. 213 points, by the way, Petacchi, 203 to Hushoff, 197 to Cavendish. One of those 3s will win today, and then the dignitaries from the 3 countries are waiting to present the prize. Will be told which one gets to go up on the stage.
Well, there's a sprint coming up, Phil, at 44.5 kilometres to go. There are 6 points, 4 and 2, but they're at the top end of the Champs-Élysées, and we get an indication as to whether or not Cavendish is going to go for it.
Well, it's the next time up the Champs-Élysées we get the first race. Now, if there's a break on, I think Petacchi would be very wise not to bother to chase it, let it go, because they'll take all of the points next time up the Champs-Élysées, but they're going to get riders attacking all of the time. Is this Reblon who's gone?
Well, the French will be looking to try and get themselves into a breakaway. There was a big organisation on the front end by Team Rabobank. Hincapie has dragged himself, Phil, back into this race, and he's just getting himself onto the back end of the main field.
Team AG2R, the French can't believe it this year. They won the first 3 stages in the Pyrenees, unheard of for years and years and years. And they've had a wonderful tour. Now they're trying to get a breakaway moving here.
Just as a point of interest, Phil, in fact, the French president, who himself is quite a keen cycling enthusiast, has invited all of the French stage winners to the Élysée Palace tomorrow night with their team managers.
I bet he's also thrown in Lance Armstrong. Did you know he's an incredible fan of Lance Armstrong?
I did, and in fact the French riders were a little bit upset that when he came to the Tour de France the other day, the first person he sought out to congratulate, in fact, was Armstrong.
Great admirer of Armstrong and Nicolas Sarkozy. As we go for a quick pan off around this beautiful city and the Tour de France, that's because they've gone under the tunnel, but here they come out again now, left past the Ferris wheel, which we should see this time, and then onto their second circuit. That seemed to go very, very quickly, that lap.
It certainly went very rapidly indeed, and those 6 riders now, the crowd is all over.
Corner.
Looks like it. The garden there that you're looking at, the Jardin de Tuileries, in fact, was converted into a garden after it had been wasted as a quarry to begin with in 1666. This is actually a good situation for riders like Mark Cavendish to have this breakaway go off the front end of the main field, because it means they won't actually have to go out and try and sprint for those sprint points 6, 4 and 2.
Now that's the kilometre when we come to the final lap. Now that's where Mark Cavendish will expect his team to be all around him. Remember, his team are weakened. 2 riders no longer in the race. Sadly, right out on stage 1, we lost Adam Hansen. He broke bones in a crash, the man from Queensland. Then we had the disqualification by Mark Renshaw, which was a real shame for them all concerned. That was on stage 11.
Well, nice little hotel in the backdrop there, Phil, if you want to put in some rather large expenses. That's the Hotel Crillon, probably the most expensive hotel in France, just on the edge of the Place de la Concorde. Again, a big move coming off the front. It was a red jersey. I think it was probably BMC, but it's always hard to see from this altitude.
Now it's Cofidis, the French team here. They come from this part of France, not in Paris, but just up from the north. Pas-de-Calais is the department, the sort of riders you might want to see attack here. Now this is the Russian champion who's having a go. No, it is the Belarus champion who's having a go.
I think this is Kushinsky coming off the front end of the main field. He's the champion of Belarus. This team has obviously been very successful throughout the whole of the season this year, Phil. But this year, I would say, out of the Tour de France, they don't really have an awful lot to shout home about.
Now this time at the top of the Champs-Élysées, before we make the left turn, there are sprints, 6-4 and 2 points for the green jersey, and they're still all together. Now Will Pataki will keep a very, very close eye on Hushoft and on Cavendish. I just don't think Cavendish will go. He only likes to sprint for first, but I'd certainly watch Hushoft.
Well, one thing that's important, you see, for a sprinter like Mark Cavendish, Phil, you don't want to make repeated efforts during the day, and the kind of speed that Cavendish has got, he wants to harness it for one big sprint on the day.
Yeah.
Hushoft, on the other hand, as you've said, he's quite prepared to go out and try and get points at these intermediate points, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him trying to get across the gap. Currently, it's not looking too good for them because there is a breakaway clear.
Well, a little bit of a tricky move, this one. The Liquigas rider is going for the points, and I don't think anybody's going to get to them, but there's a lineup of riders moved right into the gutter here on the Champs-Élysées to try and split it away. They've got 6 riders going clear, and this is a good result, I think, for Pataki, because nobody of importance is in that group.
Well, as they get up to the top 100 meters to go, the first 3 places are about to disappear as we come up to 50 meters to go. It was Marcus Burkhardt coming across the gap there. Kuczynski gets first place, Burkhardt second, and it looks to me as if the rider coming across there was from Euskaltel, could very well have been Perez.
Well, that's a throwaway for all of the boys looking for the green jersey, that's for sure. So Pataki can tick that one off with success.
Well, he can tick that one away, and he can now relax for a few more laps. But at 77 kilometers of the race covered, there is another sprint at the top end of the Champs-Élysées. They call it the Eau de Champs-Élysées for the sprint point. Just looking to see the green jersey. There you can see him over on the left-hand side, Alessandro Pataki, and strangely enough, under a Norwegian flag. Well, the Danish flag is also turning out here to celebrate the Tour de France. Right up at the top end of the Champs-Élysées. It is a tough course, this, Phil, I know, and I remember going back how fast it was going down the opposite side of the Champs-Élysées. You are just trying to do whatever you can to hang on to the wheel of the rider in front of you.
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? Because you're in front of so many thousands of people on the centre of Paris. You can't lose that wheel and be on your own because you're a professional.
Well, there's confirmation. Kuczynski, Burkhardt, and it was Perez got across the gap there for Euskaltel. On the front now, though, this is probably the man with the biggest shoulders in the main field, Gregory Rast, former Swiss national champion on Team Radio Shack.
Well, he is a massive man. When he gets on the front of the bunch, we have a job seeing the rider behind him, but that's Pierre Fedrigo of France, who's just got in behind him. He's also had his wonderful moment, too, in the Tour de France. Remember when he broke away? And Lance Armstrong was in that breakaway. Armstrong finished 6th, but Fedrigo was the sprinter of the group, and he got away with that then. So that is, and is Fedrigo wiped out. Rast has gone into 2nd place, and the bunch more or less got there. Now this is interesting, Paul, because they're not splitting up here. They're trying to split up, but the bunch is paying attention and not letting the little riders escape here. Not little in stature, but not little in reputation, rather just little in stature.
Yeah, it takes a while for a break to form because everybody wants to be in the breakaway on the Champs-Élysées on the final day, because everybody wants to be able to shout home and say, hey, I've made it, I've got myself to Paris, I'm on the Champs-Élysées and I'm in the breakaway. But again, you will see these more small breakaways forming and coming back together and forming until all of a sudden somebody breaks the stranglehold for a while and they're given a bit of freedom. But then it's up to the teams of the sprinters to come to the front end and get it organized.
FDJ, remember Sandy Cassar? This isn't him, but he was the man that animated also on the road. He got himself a stage win.
This is Anthony Roux, an interesting story there. In fact, he was last place in the overall standings for a long time, Phil, and his team manager, Mark Madio, says, I don't like men who are last in the overall standings, and he managed to leapfrog up 2 or 3 places.
Well, I don't know why not, because they get more publicity than the guy in 2nd to last in the overall standings. But it's interesting, different tactics to what we've seen in the past here. And the riders chasing down these little boys who are trying to escape and have an hour or so in the lead. And they're not letting them go today, which means that the sprinters really want this one. And they don't want to give it just to Mark Cavendish. And we do have some good finishers still in this in this race, rather. People like the Kiwi Julian Dean, who has had 2 second places. Surely he can convert one into a victory. That would be an exceptional result for June.
Well, it certainly would, but in fact you see this is the start of a breakaway forming off the front end of the main field here. They've cracked off the front going over the Place de la Concorde. They've opened themselves up at 25 or 30 meters. Now what's happening behind, there's a scurry of activity at the front end of the main field as everybody starts to get that organization going to try and pull them back in. And if somebody is feeling weak, then all of a sudden the breakaway goes clear. But taking responsibility immediately. Now this is a long way out from the finish, Phil. As you can see, HTC Columbia all over the front end of the main field. So HTC Columbia announcing very early on, right guys, we're not having any breakaways on the Champs-Élysées here this afternoon, but also very close to the front. You might just have noticed Alessandro Patacchi. They will have all done the maths. There's 35 points for the first rider to cross the line. There are 19 points for the sixth rider to cross the line. Now, if Patacchi is sixth, Cavendish is first, they will have exactly the same number of points. However, Cavendish, with a superior number of victories on the individual stages, will take the glory on the final day. But I don't know that he's going to be able to put that much time between himself, or that many spaces between himself and Mark Cavendish. And Cavendish really has to have to do something very special indeed. And that's what's going to make it difficult for Cavendish to win the green jersey points competition today.
So as the riders now continue on the road here now, a little bit of a break going, but boy, they're not going to get away.
Well, there's a lot of pressure on the front end of the main field, and I don't think it's the first break that's going to go is going to be the successful one. It might be the second or the third or the fourth after that, because there is big pressure coming from HTC Columbia, and they're already ready, Phil, to come to the front end and take the responsibility of the pace.
Well, we'll see, but there's no doubt that, and I want to see a sprint finish because they're so exciting to call. I have to say, we've had some brilliant moments since 1975 when the stars have escaped. Remember that great victory by the American Jeff Pierce, who left the leading group to win on his own. We've seen the wonderful attacks of the yellow jersey of Bernard Hinault. We've seen Bernard Hinault win here when he was wearing the yellow jersey. But you can't beat the massive sprint finish off that final bend where the riders are at the moment. But they're going to keep trying because they need to outwit the fastest man on two wheels. There's no doubt in anybody's mind it is Mark Cavendish. But what about the rider in green, Patacchi? He is not much slower, and if he can get the tactics right, he could beat him.
Well, he certainly could, and he has got the ability. This is the kind of sprint finish that actually suits a man like Alessandro Patacchi. He's got the power to go for a very long sprint, and this is a long sprint on the Champs-Élysées, and it suits a man like Patacchi. It also suits a man like Thor Hushovd, who's won here as well in the past.
Let's give you some names in that breakaway. The champion of Denmark is in there, Nicky Sorensen, Sandy Cassar of Français de Jeu, along with his teammate Anthony Roux. Christophe Riblon, who started the break really, he's in there. Christian Knies of Milram. Perez, who we saw earlier, he's in there for Euskaltel. Very good sprinter in Danilo Hondo, and that's why Patacchi won't chase. If Hondo wins, the points go in the dustbin, and that's what he wants. Perez is also in there as well. It's a pretty strong break, but can they hold it?
Well, Anthony Roux, the rider from Français de Jeu off the front here. It's hard to explain to anybody who's meandered up the Champs-Élysées, Phil, and had a couple of cups of coffee or a café au lait in one of these little roadside bars, just how difficult this climb is. It goes up, and you can actually get an idea of the gradient here, but you throw in the speed that they're going up this climb here, it makes it very difficult indeed.
And you can see there's two riders on the left of the road. The rest of the breakaway is on the right of the road. I don't know why they made this road so wide. They only need the edges here. This is the busiest road in Europe under normal circumstances. Right through 24/7, the motor cars are up and down this street. But today it's reserved for the Tour de France, and the 170 riders are right across our screen now.
Well, you just see the group of riders over on the left-hand side. They're riding right in the gutter. That's actually the smoothest part of the Champs-Élysées. And the reason for that is to try and keep off the cobbles. The cobbles are very difficult. They're actually, although they're small granite cobbles put together as sort of ornamental or ceremonial cobblestones, they really are quite bumpy. And when you go around the hairpin bend at the top, in these dry conditions, the surface is quite slippery.
Well, we're completing another lap here. We're not completely off onto our second full lap at the moment. This is Rémi Poriol, who's going to be first around the corner. He's lost 1 hour, 10 minutes and 52 seconds since we left Rotterdam, but he's been on our screens a number of occasions, chased around by Carsten Kroon of BMC.
Yeah, we've hardly talked about Carsten Kroon, a rider coming to the top end of his game again after having a very nasty accident as well during the Ardennes Classics in April. Right at the front end, though, it's HTC Columbia, and watch out, you see, because Alberto Contador in the yellow jersey there is being very attentive. He knows if there's a split in the field towards the end and he loses a few seconds, he could lose his lead on the final day of the race. And that's something that he needs to be very attentive of, and he knows it. This is the leading group now, so the riders in the group. In there, you can see Nicky Sorensen, the champion of Denmark, Sandy Cassar and Anthony Roux of Française des Jeux, Riblon of AG2R. Tony Martin has got in there. I don't think he'll do too much to the success of the breakaway. Carsten Kroon, Konies, Poriol and Perez.
Well, there he is, the green jersey, and he's got himself the hot seat there. He's tacked onto the train of HTC Columbia, the team of Mark Cavendish. And meanwhile, the yellow jersey just keeping out of trouble as Luis Leon Sanchez comes up alongside him on the right of our picture. He's not interested in winning today. He's just interested in staying safe. Well,
the rumour mill again, Phil, going around saying that it looks almost certain that Luis Leon Sanchez is going to ride for Team Rabobank next year. They're obviously looking for somebody to ride high up in the overall standings and support Denny Menchoff.
Well, he's maturing all the time. He's still a very young man. Winner of the Tour Down Under in Australia. He is a good bet for the future. And I would think after this year, his price has gone up as well.
I think almost certainly, just looking, this is now starting to look like rather a dangerous breakaway, because when you get a breakaway of a large number of riders, and there are 11 riders in this breakaway, and they are all prepared to do the pacemaking, I would say, except for one man, number 115, who's sitting at the back there. Tony Martin, I don't think wants this breakaway to succeed.
Now, keep an eye on 115. You see, he's not helping at all. They're all rushing around him. His job is to marshal the group. He wants it to be caught, while the man in green, Alessandro Patacchi, doesn't want it to be caught, because there's a lot of riders taking all the major points away in the green jersey competition, which will keep him in green for the podium tonight. Very happy with the situation right now.
Big high speeds, though, on the Champs-Élysées, as always, and again, it's being left up to HTC Columbia. This team dedicates themselves to only one goal at the end of a stage like this. It's Mark Cavendish. They do everything they can. They put all of their own personal ambitions to one side to keep the race nice and high, to keep the pace nice and high, and try and prevent that breakaway going clear. In fact, they're doing a good job, because they've let that group go to 16 seconds. They've now slowly dragged it back down to 10 to 12.
145 there, Christian Knies, the champion of Germany. And Sandy Cassar here, he had his stage win, almost got two. Champion of Denmark, Nicky Sorensen, in that red and white jersey. And if you ever get a chance to see the flags flying here, there are an enormous number from, I can see a Finnish flag at the moment, from Scandinavia, from Denmark and Norway in particular. And so Thor Hushoff will try his best to fly the flag today at the finish. Just running around the backside of the circuit here now. The peloton have eased up. It might go out a little bit, 14 seconds. The hard working of HTC Columbia, they've no choice but to keep them limited, that breakaway, and hope they can shut it down as we continue on. We are coming round to the end of our second lap of 8.
Well, they put their big time trialist on the front for HTC Columbia. That's Maxime Montfort, the Belgian national champion in the time trial. And that's the tactic that they've adopted many times before, Phil. And then they will also ask Konstantin Sivtsov. They will try and reserve Mick Rogers, Andre Greipel and the other guys for the latter part of this race, when they need some more serious firepower. Oh, that's Montfort. Didn't quite catch that under the shadow of the Maid of Orleans, Joan of Arc here, who's looking down on these riders and looking across at the famous museum of the Louvre. Get a chance here to see, this is Riblon. Great ride by Riblon. He's actually much better renowned as a track rider, but he got himself a very good victory in the mountains in the Tour. Tony Martin, second in the time trial yesterday, second in the opening day prologue to the same man, Fabian Cancellara. He is a great star for the future. The head of the race now being given back up to 16 seconds advantage, as we can see Konstantin Sivtsov coming up to the front end of the main field. Just sitting in the second row there behind the HTC riders. You might notice the Lamprey squad, they're not too bothered at all here, because if the breakaway goes clear and there is no sprint for the win this afternoon, then Mark Cavendish has no chance at all of getting himself the victory in the green jersey. So that's why HTC are so keen to come to the front end of the main field and do all of this pacemaking. Just over the back there, you might just notice the Opera, the Palais Garnier, the Opera House, and that was constructed in 1862. And if you've ever seen the movie The Phantom of the Opera, it's all based on the history and the story of that theatre there. On to the Champs-Élysées now. Now it's Team Sky coming to the front end of the main field.
The riders are now completing lap number 2. This little breakaway, well, it's rather a big breakaway, really. 11 men. Rather a lot, Paul. A lot of firepower down there now.
That's the scary thing about the Champs-Élysées. You can afford to let a group of 4 or 5 riders go clear and know that you can control it down towards the end. But if you've got that many riders, there are a lot of riders prepared to do all of the pacemaking. You just noticed there Thor Hushoff riding at the front end of the pack. He's keen and dedicated as well to try and see. He's not going to give up. You know, he's only looking for 10 points on Alessandro Petacchi to get himself the green jersey back.
I noticed Team Sky are helping with the chase now, and the reason for that is they've got nobody in it, and they'd like to set this up today for Boysenhagen. The black jersey on the front is Sky Riders trying now to help HTC Columbia bring this breakaway back. It's a good call by Mark Cavendish's team. They put Tony Martin in the breakaway. He's been instructed by his team not to take part in the breakaway. So if they don't get caught, it's up to Tony Martin to win the day for the team.
Yeah, Martin, he could, but the thing is that with the position of Danilo Hondo in that breakaway, he's going to be a tough man to beat in himself. He's a very good sprinter, and he's actually the lead-out man for Alessandro Petacchi. So if this breakaway stays clear, I would put the chances of victory onto his shoulders.
Well, but Martin would have to break away, wouldn't he?
Certainly would.
He's got the power.
He has the power, and he's got great legs. He was second in the time trial yesterday to Fabian Cancellara. The second time he's been second in a time trial in this event, because he was second in Rotterdam.
Talking just 17 seconds there. Tony Martin got the bronze medal to Cancellara in the World Championships in Montreux in Switzerland last year, and they'll probably come head-to-head this year in Geelong. The city of Geelong is hosting the World Time Trial Championships at the end of September. So that'll be a clash again for the big names. 24 seconds now as we head back towards the end of the lap.
Well, the gap now is starting to get to a rather precarious gap now as they come across again the Place de la Concorde and swing a right-hand bend onto the foot of the Champs-Élysées. And once you see that gap getting up to the around about the half-minute mark, these guys will start to feel very keen in the fact that they can succeed on the front end of the main field. I would be surprised to see the order coming from Tony Martin just to sit at the back of that group and not dedicate himself to the success of the breakaway, because for him, his teammates are actually chasing behind, and he has the ability now to just take a little bit of a back seat and get an easy ride, if you can get an easy ride on the final day on the Champs-Élysées. There's the front end of the peloton, and when they come up to the line now, they will be looking at around about a gap of 25 seconds.
As we're looking here now at the speeding peloton in front of an enormous crowd on the Champs-Élysées today. It is a beautiful day for bike racing. It's neither warm nor scorching hot. It's just nice. And they're chasing these 11 men with a lead now, which has gone up. Last lap it was 17 seconds, Paul. It's now 25 seconds.
Well, it's because of the size of that breakaway group. 11 riders is not a manageable breakaway group to control, and that's why it's putting pressure onto HTC and, of course, onto Team Sky. The teams behind there, you see all those riders from Lampre in the blue and pink jerseys. They don't care at all. Neither, too, does Team Cervelo test team of Thor Hushoff. They're quite happy to have a breakaway situation.
Nicky Sorensen swings off to our right here. Remy Poriol drives through for the French Cofidis team. Then comes Perez of Euskaltel-Euskadi. These are strong men who want a result. This may not be the ordinary finish that we've been expecting on the Tour de France. At the back of the race there is Tony Martin of HTC Columbia. He's been told by his team to sit at the back, watch and wait and see what happens in the chase behind. Unusual allies for Mark Cavendish today coming from Sky. They've got 2 men helping out in the chase.
Well, they're going up to the top end of the Champs-Élysées, and this is a good organisation. The French will be very excited to have these 2 riders in here from Française de Jeu. They've got another rider in there, Christophe Riblon. For them, this has been one of the best tours they've had in many, many years. And once you get a breakaway this big on the Champs-Élysées, there is all of a sudden a chance of success.
Just over 15 miles to race, which the speed they're going is approximately half hour to the finish of this year's Tour de France, which has been a battle of seconds ever since we left Rotterdam, one way or the other. This is Alexander Kolobnev right on the front now. He's riding for Robbie McEwen here on Team Katusha. They're all getting a little concerned now because that breakaway is working well together. This is Reblon, the man who won a stage in the Pyrenees.
Well, he opened it up for the French really in the mountains. After that, they could not be held back at all. They dominated the Pyrenees, the French this year, apart from the big final duel between Andy Schleck and Alberto Contador round the top of the Champs. Now it's down the other side, and riders now suddenly starting to look around to say, well, you know, why don't I miss a turn here, because this is starting to hurt quite a bit, and it's being reflected in the gap because it's slowly come down to 24.
Oh, what a wonderful atmosphere here. Look at the crowd down there as we go round the top beneath the shadow of the Arc de Triomphe. This city giving its roads once again to the finish of their shop window sporting event, the Tour de France. It all began here in 1903 when just 60 cyclists went round France. They never thought that what they started then would be continuing now in 2010. Down the bottom straight, the gap is just come back 2 seconds. And Carsten Kroon, Sandy Cassar, Christian Knies was the order over that finishing line. They didn't contest it. The points don't mean anything to these boys.
No, they don't want to sprint for a point like that. They want to keep themselves organised. They don't want to make enemies in this breakaway because they need to form an entente cordiale to work together to succeed. So that's Carsten Kroon, a very nasty accident for him in the Ghent Web and the Flèche Wallonne race in April. He crashed very nastily onto his face. He actually required some plastic surgery to repair the wound that he had in that crash on the descent of the Côte de Benaïne. But now he's got himself back to the top of his game and he's got himself into the breakaway. But this breakaway is putting some serious pressure onto the teams of the sprinters, and it's all a lot to do with the big battle that everybody knows will go down to the final sprint on the final day. Cavendish is looking to win, and he's also looking to try and win the green jersey points competition, but to do that he has to finish in first place with Pataki no worse than 6th.
22 seconds, 23 kilometers is left in the Tour de France. HTC know everybody's looking at them. They are the boys with the man to win the day, so nobody's going to help them now.
No, they won't, because they all know how fast Mark Cavendish is, and that's why he won't have any friends at all in the main field. But his team are a well-drilled squad, and they have the firepower. They can pull up Michael Rogers, they can pull up Sivstov, they can pull up Grabsch, who was 3rd in the time trial yesterday. They can also pull up Tony Martin if they need to down towards the end and want to sacrifice him if they really believe that Cavendish can win.
The man to lead Mark out now in the absence of Mark Renshaw, who led him out last year to win here. He was disqualified, you remember, on stage 11 this year, is Bernard Eisel. It's up to Eisel now. Big pressure on Bernard Eisel to look for Mark Cavendish and try and get him into that last 200 meters today.
Well, they've really got big pressure on the main field, and all of a sudden there'll be a little bit of nervousness because they've stretched it out once again to 24 seconds. So the main field will all of a sudden be starting to panic, but they can't panic. They have to keep concentrated. They have to keep the order at the front end of the main field. And all of a sudden, HTC Columbia have got no friends at all in this race, but this is not the first time it's happened to them throughout this season.
This is the face now of the riders who've got to do all of the work for the boys. Steve Cummings, I think it is, has also forced his way in there for Team Sky. Bradley Wiggins is stalking down there as well. Remember that they have a good sprinter in Edwald Boyson Hagen. They call him Eddie Hagen, and he is a youngster. He's had 2/3 on the stages so far. He has got the finish if he can get it right, and I think they believe in him.
Well, all the time we keep forgetting to talk about Alberto Contador. There he is, sitting right in the middle of the main field. He's just sitting back and watching this battle go on at the front end of the main field. All he has to do is remain in the peloton to the end of this stage, and he walks away with victory number 3 at the Tour de France. But he has to stay in the main field. Underground
they go yet again. It must be quite fearsome going under there into the pitch darkness before they pop out again onto the other side of the Ferris wheel. That can be a crucial moment in the stage finish of the Tour de France when they're coming up for the last lap. Listen to the crowd as they pop out of the ground. 170 moles in action.
Well, the survivors, and it's a real large number of riders surviving, and it is quite amazing, as you've said a number of times, Phil, over the last couple of days, that most of the riders who have pulled out of this Tour de France have pulled out either through illness or injury, because there have been so many crashes, especially in the first 3 to 4 days. This is Danilo Hondo sitting on the front of the group. He must be thinking it's Christmas this afternoon, because if the breakaway survives, he's got a massive chance of success.
Looking down from the helicopter now, take a look at the time. It's barely moving. I think the clock's broken. It's only altered 3 seconds either way now for a couple of laps here, as Steve Cummings now tries to drive them through for Sky. Plenty of help coming from other teams. Team Katusha's here as well. They've got Plushin, the champion of Moldavia, and on the front there is the champion of Russia, Kolobnev. They're putting the big guns up to shut it down.
Well, you know what that tells me? Robbie McEwen has had a word with the lads and said, guys, this may be my last Tour de France, this may be my last Champs-Élysées, and that's why I want you to go out to the front, because I won in this place before. I know exactly how to do it. I won on 2 occasions on the Champs-Élysées. I wouldn't mind making it 3, and what a farewell gift that would be to McEwen if he never comes back to the Tour, and I'm not saying that he won't.
It'll match his green jersey. Title is won here. We are now 3 laps from the finish. That is 20 kilometres for the riders now. The bunch are here. It was 17 seconds 2 laps ago, 25 last lap, and it is now just 21 seconds this time around. So they're holding them, but are they leaving enough gap that they can leap across before the finish?
Well, I just noticed the face of Gerard Czolik, the German sprinter on Milram, and he was very attentive at the front end of the main field also, while Carlos Sastre, he's the guy sitting at the back for Cervelo test team. He's not enjoying this ride around.
We are looking at the hard pacemaking here of Team Katusha, who are helping out HTC Columbia at the moment. There's the field now. The gap is 20 seconds. It's being stretched out all of the time at the moment. And the bunch are making the turn again to disappear underground before they pop out into the Tuileries, heading down towards the Place de la Concorde. 14.9 kilometres to go. Now we understand Cavendish has asked the team car to tell Tony Martin to get back from the break and help him chase them down. So that's not a good sign for me, Paul.
Well, it's not a good sign, but you know, there are a number of teams are still prepared to do the pacemaking at the front, and if you've got that much power, I think they're all scared, Phil, because of the fact that it's an 11-man breakaway. If it was 5 or 6, they would know that the breakaway would weaken on the running down towards the finish, but 11 men, 10 of which will be working extremely hard to survive, is a difficult call to pull back.
I couldn't agree more here as we come down now past the Ferris wheel. 2:05 there. Well, that was Alessandro Pataki's hands that we saw there, but looking here, this is sorry, that was the lead group. That was the Lamprey rider Hondo in the group there. He is odds on to win this if it becomes a sprint from this group. He is very quick. This is the champion of Germany, Knies. Perez going through. Sandy Cassar always anxious to race. This is Remy Poriol. These boys think they might have it, you know. Nicky Sorensen goes through. This is going to be a tough race for the sprinters to control. The gap is still 18 seconds.
But as you said, Phil, because of the fact that there are 10 riders in this group who are prepared to do a lot of the pacemaking, there is some serious firepower. Danilo Hondo may have only won 1 race this year, but he's a guy who's won 84 races throughout his career. If this breakaway succeeds, he's the man who stands the most to gain out of this, and he's a teammate, of course, let's not forget, of Alessandro Patacchi. Onto the Champs-Élysées again, and they'll be looking across at this board to figure out just how far they have to go to the finish. Well, they have 13 kilometres left.
11 riders go, 2 laps of the Champs-Élysées to the conclusion of the Tour de France. The gap is 17 seconds, exactly as it was 3 laps ago.
Well, it could all come down to the final lap of the Champs-Élysées as to whether or not they nail back this group of riders who have gone off the front end of the main field. Sorensen, Cassar, Roux, Riblon, Martin, Kroon, Knies, Poriol, Perez, and Danilo Hondo, and the other Perez in there as well from Euskaltel.
The rush of the riders. Look at the anxious faces of 1 or 2. The others are just riding along now, saying they're dragging us to the finish. Thor Hushoff wearing the flag of Norway on his racing jersey because he's the champion of his country. And there's plenty of Norwegians on the Champs-Élysées today. In fact, I would say there's probably hundreds of them.
Well, just as a reminder, you know, Phil, the separation in the points classification, there's only 10 points separate Patacchi and Hushoff, and only 16 points separate Patacchi and Cavendish. That's why Cavendish is panicking. He knows that if he wants to win the points classification and the stage, he needs to pull back this leading group of 11 riders.
Well, that is absolutely assured, but Cav doesn't like to race for anything but first, and if he can't catch those groups, don't bother to even look for him. He won't contest the sprint. But as they race up towards the turn again here, just over 1.5 laps to race, 12.5 kilometres to go. The only man sitting on here at the moment, and it looks at a 2 now, is Hondo at the back and Tony Martin, and that's why there's an attack on off the front. It looks like Christian Knies.
Big move there. You see these riders looking for the smoothest part of the road. Over on the right-hand side, it is Christian Knies, the champion of Germany, riding down the gutter. The reason for that is it's just that little bit smoother, that little bit easier in the gutter, but it's a dangerous thing to do because you look how close his pedals are going to the curbstone, and this is not a normal curbstone on the Champs-Élysées. It's about 1 foot high.
Well, they're staying over to the right in the hope that they won't be so obviously in the spotlight of the peloton behind. It looks as though Burkhardt has got back up alongside him there for Carsten Kroon rather for BMC, joined by Martin. Martin is very attentive, chasing anything down, but when he gets there he won't help, and clearly he's no intention of going back to help at the back either.
Well, Contador still sitting at the front end of the main field. You can just spot him there in the yellow jersey. He's around about 10th to 15th position. He's probably got these 8 laps, Phil, and he's crossing them off one at a time and saying, I'm a bit closer to home. Let's get this race over and done with.
Well, I must say, you can hear the crowd cheering these riders right around the Champs-Élysées. If you gave them some vuvuzelas, we would be in trouble today. Shades of the World Cup in South Africa as the peloton now locks on and comes down that left-hand side, stretched out at the front, back up to 60, 65 kilometres an hour. The gap is 16 seconds.
Still 16 seconds, locked in at that same quarter of a minute advantage. Now it's starting to split. Knies has been joined here by Nicky Sorensen there. He's just sitting on the back there in the red and white jersey, champion of Denmark. The fact that the group now, Phil, is starting to split, and you can see nobody wants to take up the pace, that indicates that the riders in that breakaway group were really right on the edge of their game.
Christian Knies here, the champion of Germany, riding his 5th Tour de France. He's finished all 5 he's ever ridden. Last year he was exceptional. He finished 21st in the Tour de France. That's a very good finish indeed. This year he's not quite so high, but he's looking for a stage win.
Well, you can see now that they're all over the road there, trying to stay at the front end. All of the guys at the back, they're not really involved in this bike race anymore. The situation is Sorensen and Knies are just about 10 seconds off the front of the 8 chasers, and the main field now have got a big advantage of having somebody halfway across.
Looking from the helicopter, Paul, that is a big gap as we're heading round for the last lap here. They're going to have to make a decision. They're going to need every bit of help they can get from their helpers on their team now. And there should be 3 teams interested in the chase here, maybe 4. You want the team of Cervelo for Hushoff, the team of HTC Columbia for Cavendish, the team of Sky for Eddie Boysen-Hagen, and of course the team for Lampre, who is the team of Alessandro Bertacchi. There he is in the green.
You've got to be up at the front now. You've got to sit in the first 20 positions here. You've got not to think about touching your brakes. You touch your brakes at a moment like this and you go sliding down the backfield. There you can see Thor Hushoff in the jersey. He's right at the front end of the main field, just over to the side on the inside of that corner, but still they've got control at the front end of the pack.
He's tucked in on the left-hand side. He went around that corner there, but look now as the peloton strings out of these corners. Forget the guys in the last half. They're never going to get to the front again. The speed is simply too high now. Look at the length of the peloton. These are anxious moments. The flick of the left arm there from Sorensen. That means come on through, keep it going. There's a chance.
But one man has sneaked across the gap. Just peeping in there, you can see the red and black jersey of Carsten Kroon. He saw the danger of this move, but it's panic in the group behind. They're all over the road trying to get across the gap, and it's actually starting to stretch out for the 3 leaders to 18 seconds.
This is incredible. Throw a blanket over them. They're all working to the limit of their ability here, and there isn't some fresh food coming through to the front in that peloton. These boys could steal the show from the sprinters. 18 seconds, we're going up again. 8.6 kilometres left to ride. Remember, when we get through this time, it will be the bell. And Liquigas have also come to the front now.
Well, I noticed Tony Martin there, the HTC rider in the breakaway, kept looking over his shoulder. He's trying to ascertain what he needs to do, and I think if he feels that they're about to get caught, he will drop off the back of that group that he's with, and then he'll become an integral part of the chase for HTC Columbia to try and nail back the 3 leaders, Sorensen, Kroon and Knies.
Down we go to visit the metro just for a few seconds as we bounce back out into the highway here. Left turn now, underneath the Ferris wheel, a left and a right. You'll hear the bell, the last lap of this year's Tour de France, and they haven't got them back yet. Are they going to spoil the party here for the sprinters? Mark Cavendish would like to see some more strength at the front. There's the Norwegians, every one of those flags for Thor Hushovd, who won the green jersey last year and is a very fast finisher.
Everybody now in the Rue de Rivoli. The 3 riders that are leading this race have a 5-second advantage over 8 chasers, which keeps splitting up and going back together again. In fact, I don't think it's 8 anymore. There's a couple of guys coming across. It's 15 seconds to the main field.
Well, we're going to hear the bell with what's left of the breakaway for sure, but can they survive that nasty little drag up to the Arc de Triomphe? That's the question now, because these boys also, because they're chasing so hard, they're having to work out also their tactics in the sprint, and they might be a little bit confused right now. There's the speed of the peloton as they speed past the Hotel Crillon now. That's the left turn. Next time around, this will be the crucial right turn when they will try to... This is where Cavendish was taken off the front by Mark Renshaw 1 year ago, and they went to 1-2 on the stage. But there's no Renshaw this time, disqualified on stage 11.
Well, I tell you what, though, although Renshaw's not here, Phil, I'll bet you he's watching this at home on television, because this is the home of the sprinters. Every sprinter wants to hear that bell. Every sprinter wants to be in Paris. Every sprinter wants to win on the Champs-Élysées. There are no longer 8 riders left in that gap. We're down to the 3 leaders, 2 chasers, and the main field.
Well, 17 seconds, 25, 21, 17, and now it's 15 seconds as we go out on our last lap. Sipsoff goes through the face of Lance Armstrong. The last time we'll see Armstrong in the Tour de France, looking concentrated. I wonder what he's thinking. He's won the Tour de France right here 7 times straight. Today, he says his farewells from 23rd position in the overall.
Well, the 2 men in the middle have now been wiped away, and the gap has come down to 6 seconds. And when you see guys looking across their shoulders like that, you know, all the power, the firepower is starting to disappear. They're zigzagging left and right. The main field have done their job once again. They've got the breakaway into their sights, and very shortly before they take the left-hand bend at the top of the Champs-Élysées, it'll be, as they say in Italian, Gruppo Compacto.
6.2 kilometres to go. The team of Lampre, the team of Alessandro Petacchi, who suffered through the Alps and suffered through the Pyrenees for one reason, to be the champion of the green jersey competition for the sprinters. And if he wins this, he'll be one of the 4 elite riders in the world who can claim the green jersey in Italy, in France, and in Spain, the 3 Grand Tours. Knies is wiped out last, as he's now all part of the peloton again at 6 kilometres to go.
The thing to do now, though, for all of the teams of the sprinters is not to panic. They have to keep control. You can see Lampre at the front. There's no real line of HTC Columbia. Getting a little bit swamped in the middle there is Petacchi. Look at that. Every time he sees that there's a gate opening in front of him, he comes straight through it. He's looking for the wheel, he's looking for the lead out, but they've got to keep control. There's a nice move organised on the right-hand side of the peloton there. They're starting to get themselves to the front, and that, of course, is Team BMC.
The team HTC Columbia of Cavendish, who got 3 men at the front, and Petacchi was all at sea for a moment. He'd lost complete control of his team. He didn't know where they'd gone. He's just about gone onto the back wheel of them now. There he is in green, but also the boys in black there, because that's his Edvald Boysenhagen who's up there now for Team Sky. Can they go out on a high with a stage win?
5 kilometres is a long way to go to make a lead out. Mark Cavendish, for me, is too far forward at the moment. Look at the battle behind him. Everybody's looking for the wheel of Mark Cavendish, but now he might get some respite, because Lampre are coming up, and these are the guys who are going to try and be the lead out train for Alessandro Petacchi. He's 4th there. He's got 3 riders in front of him, but another move coming forward.
He was 4th.
He was, but it's moving all the time. I just thought I saw, scuttling up the outside, Bernie Eisel looking to get himself in front of Mark Cavendish.
Eisel has got him up to Mark Cavendish, but it's Michael Rogers who's setting the pace, the Australian member of the team. There is the man who is now within 4.5 kilometres of becoming the Tour de France champion. He's just worried about keeping out of trouble. Once we tick through 3 kilometres to go, if anybody has an accident, it doesn't matter. They'll be given the time of the day. They will still finish in the same position they started the day in.
Mickey Rogers just swung off the front there for HTC Columbia and Australia. His job done for the afternoon. Tony Martin's right at the front end of the main field. Again, we're looking here, Phil, at the big lead out for Team Sky. Lance Armstrong, the last 4 kilometres of the Tour de France for him.
Armstrong again, 4 kilometres to go as he says farewell to the Tour de France. We're coming off the Champs-Élysées, swinging across the Place de la Concorde as we swing down the bottom end to the right. On the left is the finishing line on the way back. The teams are desperate, but I'm wondering if HTC Columbia are getting themselves a little bit out of position again here.
Well, they've lost the firepower, but the organisation now is Sky. They're trying to get their man Eddie Bosenhagen right up there. There are people starting to move that last-minute attack. That this man, how calm and collected is he? To be a sprinter, you have to have nerves of steel. That was Pataki riding, Phil, on the shoulder of Mark Cavendish.
Well, this is you could see on the face of Pataki, he's still being very alert, but he's also getting very dangerous now for the riders, and you can lose position at the blink of an eyelid here. Out and around the back on the Place de la Concorde, down to the side of the Seine, back underground and out again, and it's all over.
Well, it's all a question now of remaining calm, waiting for the right moment to make the move, hoping you've got the teammates up alongside you to get you into the final corner of the Champs-Élysées in the right position. If you go around the corner on the Champs-Élysées in 10th, your chance of winning the stage has gone right out of the window.
Pataki in the centre, but just off to the left of our picture now is Edouard Boysenhagen. He's right in front, in fact, of Geraint Thomas, and there he is off to the left, and behind Geraint Thomas is Mark Cavendish, and there's no HTC boys around him now. We've got an attack, Sylvain Chavanel or Barredo?
It's Barredo. He has attacked so many times in the Tour. He's looked for victory, and all this does is create a bit of confusion for the sprinters, but not for Team Sky. They are practicing to become the lead-out train for their man, Eddie Bosenhagen. All the sprinters are right up there now, Phil. You can see right at the front end of the main field. Pataki needs to finish inside of the top 6 places. If he doesn't, and Cavendish wins the stage, then Cavendish is going to get himself the points jersey.
It is going to be a big end for the riders in the green jersey, but is it going to be a big end for Mark Cavendish or for Team Sky? They've got control of the front, but they had this when they came into Bordeaux. I said at the time it was an eclipse with the black jerseys on the front. There's only 2 of them there now, and one of them's got to win. This is where the race can be won, on this straight, as they go into the last kilometre.
Lancaster's up there looking for his man, and there's the big lead out now. There you can see the riders from Cervelo Test Team are trying to sort out their man from Norway. Inside of a kilometre to go. Thor Hushoff is right up there. He's got to get himself into the top 3, Phil, if he wants to win the green jersey again as he did last year.
Julian Dean is being moved up on the right for Garmin Transitions now. Everybody wants an in on the last stage of the Tour de France. Hushoff is tucked in off to the left. You can't quite see him, and it looks as though they're taking command. Now we can see Hushoff as well. This is going to be the flick as they cross the Concorde.
Right now into the final 2 bends, a left-hand sweeper followed by the right-hand sweeper into the Champs-Élysées, and that's when you've got to be in 2nd or 3rd position. Everybody's right up there. Pataki's there, Hushoff is there, and so too is Mark Cavendish. Hushoff is up there. I have to say, Pataki's in 3rd position.
As they come up to the finish now, the lead out, and Hushoff, is he going to pull off the big surprise as Thor Hushoff breaks for the line? Now where is the Max Missile? There he goes, over the top. Somebody just launched him, and forget it, because Mark Cavendish is streets ahead of the Tour de France when it comes to a sprint finish, and Pataki comes over in 2nd place. He will win the green jersey. Paul, it's as if somebody just pulled a catapult.
That is amazing, the speed that he's got, the turn of speed. He came from nowhere. Don't forget Alberto Contador, 3rd victory in the Tour de France. 5 Grand Tour wins for the Spaniard. But let's go back to the sprint, Phil. You know, the sprints are probably the most exciting part of the sport for me. Hushoff did everything he could. He was right up there. Pataki got across the line ahead of him. And as they were full on, they had the pedal to the metal. They were going flat out. Then all of a sudden, bang, out of the group comes Mark Cavendish.
2 speeds in this race, 1 for Cavendish, 1 for the rest in the sprint. That's Mark Cavendish's 4th stage. It matches up with stage 5, 6, and so he makes it stage 18 and stage 20. There's no stopping Mark Cavendish, but he lost the green jersey in the first week. He'll tell you that immediately, because he fell off when he had a chance of winning. It was his fault he fell off in the sprint. So he's lost the green jersey, but he does what he does best. He wins stages of the Tour de France. But this is the man who has won the Tour de France, and he's won it by 39 seconds. The 5th closest finish in the history of the Tour de France.
Well, looking back to the finish there you can see the face of Julian Dean. Pataki did everything he could there. Torhushov was ideally placed coming into that final corner there, Phil, to try and create the surprise. But nobody surprises this man. Yeah, we know, Mark, it's 5 for you this year. It was 6 last year, and it was 4 the year before, making a total tally of 15 individual stage wins in 3 years.
Well, he came so quickly. He wasn't in the great position he was in when he got to this point in the race last year, because he was right on the wheel of Mark Renshaw, and they crossed the line first and second. He had to use the other big sprinters. He was behind Pataki, who was behind Hushov, who was being led out by his teammate, and his teammate's name there was it was Ben Lancaster that was leading him out. And as Lancaster moved over, watch the move now. Pataki must have sensed him coming, so it's one-on-one. And I'm afraid nobody is in the same speedster league as Mark Cavendish. He just pulled away for his 4th win of this year's Tour de France, and there weren't many stages for the sprinters this year. Mark reckoned 6 of them. Well, he won 4.
Well, you know, he actually jumped at exactly the same time as Alessandro Pataki on that occasion, but he got the jump and his acceleration was so quick. Pataki did well, though, because Pataki had the team work for him. They paced him up to the corner, and he got the best he could out of this, but he will walk away as the winner of the green jersey points classification.
And that's very, very much a big target, and that's why he stayed in the Tour. And he won that green jersey with some fine riding on the days that counted for the great Italian cyclist.
Well, as we look down here on the Arc de Triomphe, that was a great battle of the sprinters. The Arc de Triomphe basically was built to celebrate, of course, the victories of Napoleon's army. Well, today we saw a victory and a battle of the sprinters, and Mark Cavendish was the fastest of all the sprinters, ahead of Pataki, Julian Dean and Jürgen Roelandts popping in there for Omega Pharma Lotto. Slipping back a fraction there, Torhushov, well, he tried. He had his teammates lead him right to the corner in an ideal position, but as he said himself, he hasn't done that much sprint training after his accident when he broke his collarbone while out training in the month of May. So the overall standings, no change on this final day. Everybody finishing in exactly the same time. Alberto Contador 39 seconds ahead of Andy Schleck. Denis Menshov of Russia up there in 3rd place at 2:01. Sammy Sanchez in 4th at 3:40. Jürgen van den Broek 5th. And going down to complete the top 10, Joachim Rodriguez in his first attempt at the Tour de France from Katusha in 8th place. Kreuziger 9th, the youngster from Liquigas at 11:54, and Chris Horner making it a top 10 finish for the American at 38 years of age.